My name is Chloe. I am 33 years old, and a year after my brutal divorce, my arrogant ex-mother-in-law spotted me in the hallway of Seattle's most exclusive maternity ward. She blocked my path, looked me up and down with absolute disgust, and said with a smug smile that leaving me was the best decision her son ever made, and that he now had a beautiful baby boy with my former best friend. I did not cry. I did not run away. I just smiled, checked my watch, and asked her if she truly believed that. I told her to wait exactly 7 minutes to see what happened next. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who completely underestimated your worth. The pristine corridors of the Cedar Grove Medical Center VIP wing smelled of fresh lilies and expensive antiseptic. At $5,000 a night, this floor was reserved for tech billionaires, celebrities, and people who desperately wanted to be them. People like my ex-husband David and his new wife Jessica. I was calmly walking toward the private elevator bank when a sharp, familiar voice sliced through the quiet atmosphere. Chloe. What on earth are you doing here? I turned around to see Barbara, my 60-year-old ex-mother-in-law, aggressively marching directly toward me. She was dressed in her signature tailored tweed suit, a string of pearls resting against her collarbone, looking every bit the arrogant matriarch she pretended to be. She stepped directly into my path, physically blocking me from reaching the elevator. Her eyes darted over my tailored blazer and designer bag, her lips curling into a sneer of pure condescension. "Do not tell me you are stalking David," she said, her voice carrying down the quiet hallway, "because that would just be pathetic even for you." I held my ground, keeping my expression perfectly neutral. "I am not stalking anyone, Barbara. I have business here." "Business?" Barbara let out a harsh, mocking laugh that echoed off the marble walls. "What business could you possibly have on a maternity ward? You are a barren, failed real estate developer who lost her company and her husband in the same week. You have no business being anywhere near my family." She took a step closer, invading my personal space, her voice dripping with venom. "David and Jessica just welcomed a perfect, healthy baby boy, a true heir to our family legacy. Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made. Now he finally has a real woman who can give him what you never could." The sheer cruelty of her words was designed to break me. For 5 years of my marriage to David, Barbara had constantly berated me for not getting pregnant, ignoring the fact that we were putting all our energy into building a commercial real estate firm from scratch. She loved reminding me of my supposed failures. She loved bringing up the fact that I walked away from my own company during the divorce with nothing but a paltry settlement. She thought I was destroyed. She thought David had outsmarted me when he and Jessica, my former best friend, blindsided me with forged documents and stole the business I had spent countless sleepless nights building. Barbara thought I was standing in this hospital as a defeated woman mourning the life they had stolen from me. She had no idea that the woman standing before her was not the same broken wife she had chased out of her house a year ago. I looked at Barbara, really looked at her, and saw exactly what she was. An insecure, bitter woman grasping at the illusion of superiority. I did not flinch. I did not defend myself or try to explain my presence. Instead, I slowly raised my left wrist and glanced at my watch. It was a custom timepiece I had bought for myself to celebrate my recent quiet victories, a symbol of the time I had reclaimed. "You know, Barbara," I said, my voice dangerously calm and perfectly level. "It is fascinating how confident you are in your son's choices. Are you absolutely sure that baby is a blessing?" Barbara's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second, her perfectly plucked eyebrows drawing together in confusion. "What is that supposed to mean?" she snapped. "Are you threatening my grandson?" I let out a soft, genuine laugh. "I am not threatening anyone, but you might want to reconsider your definition of a family legacy. You asked what business I have on this floor. I am here because my brother-in-law, Dr. Marcus, personally invited me." At the mention of Marcus, Barbara's face tightened with instant distaste. Marcus, the brilliant chief of medicine at this very hospital, was married to David's sister, Maya. He was also an African-American man who had spent years silently enduring Barbara's veiled microaggressions and arrogant behavior. Marcus despised Barbara's fake high society pretenses just as much as I did. And unlike David, Marcus was a man of absolute integrity and immense power within these hospital walls. "You are bluffing," Barbara sneered, though a hint of uncertainty crept into her voice. "Marcus is busy running this hospital. He has no time for a failed ex-wife." I smiled a wide, predatory smile that finally made Barbara take a half-step back. "We will see about that," I replied smoothly. "In fact, why do not we wait right here?" I tapped the glass face of my watch. "Let us see what happens in exactly 7 minutes." The psychological warfare had officially begun, and Barbara had no idea she was already standing in the center of the blast zone waiting for a countdown she could not stop. She thought the dark past was permanently buried under her lies, but the bitter truth was about to catch up to her in the most spectacular and devastating way possible. The heavy oak door of the luxury delivery suite swung open with a soft click. Out stepped David, looking less like a man about to welcome a child, and more like a CEO, stepping onto a red carpet. He wore a perfectly tailored navy blue designer suit, the exact kind of obnoxious power outfit he always insisted on wearing to project wealth. He adjusted his silk tie, ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, and froze the moment his eyes landed on me. His initial shock instantly morphed into the same arrogant scowl his mother wore. He marched down the hallway to stand shoulder to shoulder with Barbara, forming a united front of hostility. "Chloe." David snapped, his voice sharp and dripping with condescension. "What are you doing lurking outside my wife's delivery room? Have you lost your mind entirely? You need to leave right now before Jessica hears your voice. She is going through enough stress bringing my son into the world, and the last thing she needs is the pathetic ex-wife causing a scene." Barbara crossed her arms, nodding in furious agreement. "I already told her to leave, David. She is completely delusional. She claims Marcus invited her here. She is just obsessed with us." David let out a harsh breath, shaking his head as if he pitied me. "Look at yourself, Chloe. It has been a year. We divorced. I took the company we started. I upgraded to a woman who actually supports my vision and can actually give me a family. You got a tiny settlement and walked away with nothing. You need to move on. Stop embarrassing yourself. Security will drag you out of here in front of everyone if you do not turn around and walk to that elevator right now." I did not move a single inch. I looked at the man I had spent 5 years of my life with. I remembered the endless nights I stayed awake drafting architectural plans, reviewing zoning laws, and balancing the books for our real estate firm, while he was out networking at golf courses. I remembered the moment he handed me the divorce papers, sliding a forged contract across the table that stripped me of my equity. He had smiled that exact same smug smile that day. Instead of getting angry, I tilted my head and offered him a warm, bright smile. "Actually, David, I am doing incredibly well," I said, my voice projecting a calm confidence that immediately made his jaw tighten. "In fact, I have been keeping a very close eye on your career. I hear congratulations are in order. You finally secured the downtown commercial mega project. That is a massive construction deal for someone who barely understands how to read a structural blueprint." David puffed out his chest, his ego overriding his annoyance for a split second. "Yes, I did. A $50 million development. It is the biggest contract in the city. Something you could never achieve when you were holding me back. Now leave." I took one deliberate step closer to him, lowering my voice just enough to force him to lean in. "It is a fantastic contract, David. Truly. But it is very expensive to manage, especially when you consider the corner cutting. Tell me, how exactly do you plan to explain the $2.4 million you illegally skimmed from your electrical and plumbing subcontractors last Tuesday?" The silence in the hallway was immediate and absolute. The arrogant smirk vanished from David's face so fast, it was almost comical. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him looking like a ghost in a very expensive suit. He stared at me, his eyes wide with sudden, unadulterated panic. Barbara looked back and forth between us, her own confidence faltering as she saw the sheer terror gripping her son. "David," she asked, her voice tight. "What is she talking about? What money?" David ignored his mother. He swallowed hard, a bead of sweat forming at his hairline. He stepped away from Barbara, closing the distance between him and me, his voice dropping to a frantic, hoarse whisper. "How do you know about that? That is a private ledger. That information is highly classified. Who have you been talking to?" "Chloe? Are you hacking my secure servers?" I let out a soft chuckle, stepping back to maintain my personal space. "I do not need to hack anything, David. When you force your ex-wife out of a company with a fake contract, you should probably make sure she does not still have friends in the accounting department. Or better yet, you should probably make sure the people financing your massive mega project are not looking closely at your highly illegal financial maneuvers. Diverting construction funds to pad your personal offshore accounts is a federal offense. You crossed a major legal line, David. And you were sloppy." "You are lying," David stammered, though his trembling hands completely betrayed him. "You have no proof. You are just trying to ruin my big day because you are bitter." Just then, a piercing, agonizing scream echoed from the delivery room behind him. Jessica was crying out in severe pain, shouting for David to come back and hold her hand. The nurses were urgently calling his name through the heavy doors. "David," Barbara snapped, grabbing his arm and shaking it. "Go back inside. Your wife needs you. Your son is coming. Leave this crazy woman alone. We will have her arrested for harassment tomorrow." But David could not move. His feet were glued to the expensive marble floor of the VIP ward. The screams of his new wife entirely faded into the background as he stared at me with absolute dread. He was completely paralyzed, trapped by the terrifying realization that his entire financial life was dangling by a thread, and I was the one holding the scissors. "You really should go to her, David," I said pleasantly, gesturing toward the delivery room doors. "She sounds like she is in a lot of pain. And you are going to need all the happy family moments you can get right now. Because the people you stole from are not going to be nearly as forgiving as I was during our divorce." David opened his mouth to speak, to beg, to threaten, but no words came out. He just stood there, hyperventilating in his designer suit, his perfect world rapidly cracking apart at the seams. And we still had 4 minutes left on the clock. The nightmare was just beginning. Barbara watched her son unravel before her very eyes. The color drained from her perfectly powdered face as she registered David backing away, clutching his chest like he could not draw a breath. She did not know the details of his subcontractor scheme, but she knew the smell of financial ruin when it filled a room. Her panic instantly morphed into rage. She spun toward me, her manicured finger pointing directly at my face. "How dare you threaten my son?" she hissed, her voice vibrating with venom. "You are nothing but a jealous, bitter woman trying to ruin the happiest day of his life. I will not let you stand here and terrorize my family." She whipped her head around, desperately searching the quiet corridor for an audience. A young Filipina nurse was hurriedly walking past, carrying a tray of fresh linens. Barbara snapped her fingers at the young woman as if calling a dog. "You there," Barbara barked. "Drop those towels and go get hospital security immediately. I want this woman physically removed from the premises." The nurse paused, her eyes widening in confusion. "Mom, I am assigned to the neonatal unit. I cannot leave my post to call security unless there is a physical altercation." Barbara scoffed, her face twisting into an ugly sneer. "I do not care what your little job description says. I am a platinum donor to this hospital. My grandson is currently being born in the VIP suite. I suggest you practice your English, listen to my instructions, and fetch security before I have you deported." The nurse stepped back, visibly shaken by the sudden racist vitriol. I opened my mouth to intervene, but a deep, commanding voice echoed down the corridor, stopping Barbara dead in her tracks. "No one is calling security, Barbara. And if you ever speak to my staff like that again, I will personally throw you out of my hospital." Dr. Marcus stepped out from the adjacent staff lounge. At 36, Marcus was a towering presence. He wore his crisp white coat over a tailored charcoal suit, his badge clearly identifying him as the chief of medicine. He was also an African-American man who had endured years of Barbara treating him like the hired help at family dinners, despite him being married to her own daughter Maya. Marcus despised Barbara. He despised her fake high society pretenses, her casual bigotry, and the way she enabled David to become a monster. Today, Marcus was holding all the cards, and he knew it. He walked right up to the nurse, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and thanked her for her hard work, telling her to return to her duties. The nurse shot a grateful look at him and scurried away. Marcus then turned his full, intimidating focus onto his mother-in-law. Barbara gasped quickly, trying to arrange her face into a pleasant, motherly smile. "You misunderstand. Chloe is harassing David. She snuck up here to cause a scene while Jessica is in labor. You are the chief of medicine. You need to exercise your authority and have her escorted out." Marcus crossed his arms, his dark eyes locking onto Barbara, with absolute zero tolerance. "I do not misunderstand anything, Barbara. I know exactly why Chloe is here. I invited her." Barbara let out a shrill laugh of disbelief. "You invited her? Why on earth would you invite David's crazy ex-wife to the birth of his child? You have no right to bring strangers into our family moment. This floor is restricted. It is for VIPs and major donors only. Chloe has no right to stand on this floor." Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His quiet authority was terrifying. "Actually, Barbara Chloe has every right to stand on this floor. She has more right to be here than you do. Because she does not just have a guest pass, she owns the dirt you are currently standing on." David snapped his head up, his panic momentarily breaking as confusion flooded his eyes. "What are you talking about, Marcus?" David asked, his voice shaking. Marcus looked at David with utter contempt. "I am talking about the new expansion wing of the Cedar Grove Medical Center, the wing we are standing in right now. The hospital leases this specific parcel of land from a private commercial real estate holding company, a company that acquired the deed 6 months ago." Barbara shook her head aggressively. "So what? She does not own a holding company. She is broke. David took everything in the divorce." David was staring at me. His eyes darted frantically as his brain tried to connect the dots. "The holding company, David," whispered, his voice cracking. "Phoenix Holdings." I offered him a sweet, devastating smile. "Bingo, David." Marcus stepped closer to Barbara, delivering the final blow. "Chloe is the sole proprietor of Phoenix Holdings. She owns the land under this hospital. She designed the structural renovation for this entire VIP floor. So no, Barbara. I will not have security remove my landlord from the building she basically built. Now, I strongly suggest you sit down, shut your mouth, and wait for your grandchild to be born before you make things infinitely worse for your son." Barbara stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing silently. Her entire worldview, built on the assumption that I was a destitute failure, had just been ripped apart in front of her. She looked at David for confirmation, but David was leaning against the wall, clutching his chest, suffocating under the weight of his collapsing empire. I checked my watch. 3 minutes left. The sheer terror radiating from my former husband was intoxicating. But to truly understand how I managed to corner him so perfectly, you have to understand the day he thought he destroyed me. We have to go back exactly 1 year to a stifling downtown corporate law office, smelling of stale coffee and betrayal. The mahogany conference table in David's lawyer's office was freezing under my fingertips. Across from me sat the man I had married 5 years earlier. Right beside him, her fingers casually laced through his, was Jessica, my maid of honor. The woman who had held my dress train at my wedding, who had wiped my tears when my first business venture struggled, was now sitting there trying to wipe away my entire future. David slid a thick stack of legal documents across the polished wood. His lawyer, a predatory shark in a tailored suit, who had not made eye contact with me since I walked in, tapped a gold pen against the table. David leaned back in his leather executive chair, radiating an unearned, sickening arrogance. He looked exactly like a man who believed he had already won the war. Sign it, Chloe." David commanded, his voice echoing loudly in the quiet room. Let us not drag this out and make it uglier than it needs to be. The settlement is more than generous. I looked down at the documents. $20,000. That was his insulting buyout offer for my 50% stake in the commercial real estate firm I had conceptualized, funded, and managed. I had built the complex financial models. I had secured the impossible zoning permits. I had spent countless nights sleeping on the freezing office floor to ensure our projects were completed on time, while he played golf with contractors and drank expensive scotch with investors. Yet he sat there claiming my sweat and blood were merely clerical work, attempting to erase my entire professional existence with a few forged signatures. We both know this firm is worth tens of millions, David, I said, keeping my voice intentionally soft, testing the waters of his fragile ego. I built the infrastructure. David scoffed, exchanging a victorious, mocking look with Jessica. We did not build anything, Chloe. I built it. You just filed the paperwork. You were nothing but a paper CEO, a convenient figurehead. I put in place for diversity quotas when bidding for lucrative city contracts. You do not have the killer instinct for this industry. You never did. Just sign the papers, take the check, and walk away before I decide to charge you for my legal fees. I opened my mouth to respond, to unleash the fury boiling in my chest, but the words died in my throat. My eyes flicked from the pathetic number on the paper to Jessica's neck. There, resting against her collarbone, was a flash of deep, unmistakable green. My breath hitched. I forced my face to remain entirely blank, burying the profound shock beneath a mask of forced submission. It was an antique emerald pendant set in a delicate, handcrafted filigree chain. My late grandmother's necklace. The specific heirloom I had frantically searched for 3 months ago, tearing my closet apart in a panic, while David stood in the doorway assuring me I had probably just misplaced it at a charity gala. He had not just stolen my husband and my best friend. They had rummaged through my most sacred belongings. They had violated my personal sanctuary and gifted my family heirlooms to each other right under my nose. Jessica caught my gaze and immediately reached up her manicured fingers, lightly caressing the emerald. A smug, triumphant smirk played on her lips. David said green was my color. She said, her voice dripping with toxic sweetness. He thought it deserved to be worn by someone who actually appreciates the finer things. We just want to move on, Chloe. Take the 20,000. You can start over somewhere smaller, somewhere more your speed. Rage is a useless emotion if you let it blind you. I realized in that exact moment that confronting them about the necklace would achieve absolutely nothing. If I screamed, if I fought back right then, his lawyer would lock down every asset, every file, every blueprint we had ever created. I needed David's ego to be his absolute downfall. I needed them arrogant, and I needed them completely careless. I remembered a rainy Tuesday during our sophomore year of college. Jessica had been crying in my dorm room because she maxed out stolen credit cards to buy a fake designer handbag to impress a sorority. I had covered for her then. I knew exactly who she was, a superficial, opportunistic thief. And I knew exactly who David was, a hollow shell of a businessman who relied entirely on my intellect. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I slumped my shoulders. I let my voice waver just enough to sound thoroughly broken. I let a single pathetic tear escape my eye, watching it splash onto the polished mahogany. Is this really it, David? I asked, looking down at my shaking hands. After everything we built together, you are just going to leave me with this? David rolled his eyes in disgust, muttering about how overly emotional I had always been. It is just business, Chloe. Stop crying and sign the damn paper. I picked up the heavy gold pen. My hand trembled, a flawless performance of a defeated woman. As I signed my name on the final page, my eyes darted to the stack of black leather portfolios resting at the edge of the table. David had brought the master files for the riverfront development, a massive commercial project we had been quietly acquiring permits for over the past 2 years. It was the absolute crown jewel of our firm, a billion-dollar project that was weeks away from breaking ground. He brought the files because he planned to take them straight to the bank after this meeting to secure his new solo financing. I slid the signed divorce papers back across the table. Jessica immediately snatched them, a triumphant grin spreading across her face, as she practically shoved them toward the lawyer. While David and his attorney were entirely distracted verifying my signature, I stood up, feigning a clumsy stumble, as I reached for my coat. In one fluid, practiced motion, I swung my heavy tote bag directly against the stack of portfolios. They tumbled onto the floor, scattering violently across the carpet. "Oh, I am so sorry," I stammered, dropping to my knees and scrambling awkwardly. "Leave it, Chloe." David snapped, his voice filled with utter contempt. "I will get it. You always make a mess of everything." But I was already moving. Beneath the shadow of the massive conference table, my hands flew with practiced precision. I quickly grabbed the thickest black portfolio, the one containing the irreplaceable original architectural blueprints, the certified soil reports, and the proprietary zoning loopholes I had personally drafted. I slipped it straight into my oversized tote bag. In its place, I shoved a nearly identical black portfolio from my bag onto the pile, one containing nothing but hundreds of pages of outdated plumbing invoices and blank drafting paper. I stood up smoothly, placing the decoy folder neatly back on the table just as David leaned over. David did not even double-check the files. His arrogance was an impenetrable shield that blinded him to reality. He grabbed the decoy folder, tucked it proudly under his arm, and looked at me with absolute disdain. "Goodbye, Chloe," he said. "Try not to fail at your next little project." Jessica leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "It is for the best, Chloe. We really are so much happier now." I hoisted my heavy tote bag onto my shoulder, feeling the solid weight of the billion-dollar blueprints resting securely against my side. I looked at the stolen emerald necklace shining around her neck, then at the forged divorce papers clutched tightly in David's hand. "You two deserve exactly what is coming to you," I said, my voice eerily calm and steady. I turned and walked out of the heavy mahogany doors, leaving my cheating husband and my backstabbing best friend to celebrate their entirely empty victory. They thought they had buried me, leaving me with $20,000 and a broken heart. They had no idea I was walking out of that building with the entire future of their empire hidden in my purse, ready to build a devastating new reality from the ashes of their lies. The lever was primed, but to fully spring the trap I needed David to blindly throw himself into the abyss. His ego required a stage, an audience, and a grand declaration of his own perceived genius. He provided himself exactly that opportunity 6 months ago at the annual Pacific Northwest Real Estate Charity Gala. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel was dripping in cascading crystal chandeliers and the heavy scent of expensive floral arrangements. It was the premier event of the season, a glittering high-stakes battlefield where prominent developers, city politicians, and ruthless equity investors circled each other with champagne flutes and fake gleaming smiles. I attended the event wearing a sleek, unbranded charcoal silk gown. I blended seamlessly into the shadows near the silent auction tables, sipping sparkling water and watching the room with the calculated patience of a starving predator. I was no longer the discarded, destitute ex-wife they thought they had ruined and swept under the rug. I was the silent, invisible architect of their impending destruction. It did not take long for the vultures to spot me. Barbara parted the sea of black tuxedos and sequined dresses with the aggressive, demanding entitlement she brought to every room she entered. Her sharp eyes locked onto me, through the crowd flashing with immediate malicious delight. She turned and grabbed Jessica by the arm, practically dragging my former best friend across the polished ballroom floor. Jessica was wearing a shimmering, ostentatious gold maternity gown that clung tightly to her newly swelling belly. She rested a protective manicured hand over her stomach, deliberately making sure her pregnancy was the absolute focal point of her entire presence. Barbara halted right in front of me, her voice booming loudly enough to guarantee the attention of the surrounding high society guests. Chloe. Barbara gasped, pressing a hand to her heavy pearl necklace in mock astonishment. "You are incredibly brave to show your face here tonight. I would have thought you would be entirely too embarrassed to mingle with polite society after David had to let you go." It must be so horribly difficult for you to stand in the corner and see them so happy and successful. Jessica stepped forward, her stolen antique emerald necklace catching the bright chandelier light. She looked me up and down, her lips curling into a triumphant, predatory smirk. She held a full, heavy crystal glass of deep Cabernet in her right hand. "Oh, Chloe," Jessica purred, tilting her head with exaggerated, sickening pity. "You look so tired. And that dress. It is very brave of you to buy cheap clothes off the rack for a prestigious event like this." As she spoke the final word, Jessica intentionally shifted her weight forward. Her wrist flicked outward in a swift, highly calculated motion. A tidal wave of dark red wine slashed violently across the bodice of my charcoal gown. The cold liquid soaked instantly through the delicate silk, spreading into an ugly dark stain that ruined the garment completely. The surrounding circle of guests gasped audibly. Conversations abruptly halted. Jessica slapped a hand over her mouth, feigning absolute dramatic horror. "Oh my goodness!" Jessica cried out, her voice loud and shrill to ensure maximum public humiliation across the room. "I am so incredibly sorry, I just lost my balance. Pregnancy makes me so terribly clumsy these days." "But do not worry, Chloe. I will gladly write you a personal check to replace it. It could not have cost more than $100 anyway." The entire immediate circle of guests went dead silent. Standing less than 2 feet away from us was Mayor Harrison, holding a Scotch glass halfway to his mouth, his eyes wide with shock at the blatant high school cruelty on display. Barbara looked absolutely thrilled, her eyes gleaming with wicked satisfaction. Jessica wore a mask of innocent distress over a solid core of pure venom. They expected me to crumble. They expected me to run crying toward the restrooms, fulfilling the exact narrative of the fragile, hysterical woman David had been describing to the entire city. Instead, I did not even flinch. I calmly reached over to a nearby cocktail table, picked up a crisp white linen napkin, and gently dabbed the wine from my collarbone with steady, unshaking hands. I looked up, locking eyes with Jessica, my expression entirely devoid of emotion. I kept my voice perfectly level, raising the volume just enough so the mayor and every surrounding heavy-hitting investor could hear every single syllable clearly. "Keep your money, Jessica," I said, my voice ringing out like a cracked whip in the quiet ballroom. "You desperately need to save it. I remember how frantic you get when your bank account runs dry. I would hate for you to have to steal credit cards out of your sorority sisters' wallets again just to buy a counterfeit Birkin bag." The silence in the room immediately shifted from shocked to completely radioactive. Jessica's fake, pitying smile instantly vanished, replaced by a mask of absolute paralyzing panic. The color drained entirely from her face, leaving her pale and trembling. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I took a single, deliberate step closer to her, invading her personal space, holding her terrified gaze hostage. "Do you remember that, Jessica?" I asked, my tone conversational, but utterly lethal. "You cried on my dorm room floor for 3 straight hours, begging me not to call the police after Emma caught you going through her purse. I covered for you then because I thought you were just pathetic and broken. It is a massive shame you never grew out of taking things that do not belong to you." Mayor Harrison lowered his Scotch glass, looking at Jessica with naked, unshielded disgust. He turned his back on her and walked away without a single word. The surrounding guests immediately began whispering, leaning into each other, as the scandalous, humiliating truth rippled outward through the elite crowd. Jessica let out a strangled, humiliating sob. She turned on her heel and fled the ballroom, her gold dress swishing frantically as she ran toward the lobby in tears, desperate to escape the judging eyes of Seattle's wealthiest families. Barbara stood completely frozen, her jaw hanging slack, utterly humiliated by association, and entirely powerless to stop the whispers. Before Barbara could summon a single word of defense or retreat, a loud, commanding chime echoed over the ballroom sound system. The main stage lights flared brilliantly, illuminating the center podium. David strode onto the stage, entirely oblivious to the fact that his pregnant new wife had just fled the building in complete hysterics. He adjusted his tailored tuxedo jacket, soaking in the polite applause of the crowd. He approached the microphone with the unearned swagger of an undisputed king. Thank you, everyone. David began, his voice booming proudly off the vaulted ceilings. Tonight, I am thrilled to announce the absolute future of Seattle commercial real estate. Next month, I am officially breaking ground on the Riverfront Megamall project. It is my solo masterpiece, a testament to what bold vision and aggressive capital can achieve in this beautiful city. I stood near the back of the room, ignoring the cold wine soaking into my dress, and smiled a genuine, terrifying smile. He was standing on a brightly lit stage, publicly committing his entire professional reputation to a billion-dollar development. He was bragging to the mayor and the press about aggressive capital. He was utterly blissfully unaware that he did not possess the cash reserves to fund even the foundational concrete of the project he had stolen from my mind. In order to save face and break ground, he would have to seek massive predatory bridge loans to cover the sudden immense costs he was currently promising the city. He would have to leverage every single asset he owned, completely unaware that he was walking directly into the massive legal trap I had meticulously laid through Phoenix Holdings. He was cheerfully announcing his own total financial destruction to a room full of applause, and I was holding the match. 2 weeks after David practically set his own professional life on fire at the charity gala, the smoke was still clearing when a thick cream-colored envelope arrived at my new office. The return address belonged to Maya, David's younger sister. Inside was a VIP invitation to Jessica's lavish baby shower. Maya had always been the fiercely independent black sheep of David's family, primarily because she married Dr. Marcus, a brilliant African-American surgeon whom Barbara had aggressively tried to ban from family dinners for years. Maya absolutely despised her mother's casual bigotry and saw right through David's golden boy facade. Hosting the baby shower at her and Marcus's sprawling Bellevue estate was Barbara's strict demand, a desperate attempt to show off the family's supposed generational wealth to Jessica's shallow high society friends. Maya agreeing to host the event was her trap. Inviting me was the bait. I did not show up looking like a defeated, discarded ex-wife. I arrived wearing a tailored crimson designer pantsuit that screamed power, wealth, and absolute control. The valet took the keys to my new car, and I walked through the massive wrought iron double doors of Marcus and Maya's estate. The sprawling backyard had been transformed into a sickeningly sweet, overfunded pastel wonderland. Thousands of imported pink and white roses suffocated the patio. Jessica sat on a literal elevated wicker throne surrounded by towering stacks of expensive gifts, soaking in the fawning attention of her guests like a queen holding court. Barbara spotted me before Jessica did. The fake aristocratic smile instantly melted off her heavily powdered face, replaced by a deep, ugly, contorted sneer. She marched across the manicured lawn, her sharp heels digging angrily into the grass, abandoning her conversation with a local judge's wife. She intercepted me just as I reached the edge of the main dining pavilion. "What on earth are you doing here, Chloe?" Barbara hissed, keeping her voice low but venomous, so the wealthy guests around us would not hear. "You have some absolute nerve showing your face at my grandson's celebration. Did you sneak in through the catering entrance hoping for a free meal?" I walked through the front door. "Barbara," I replied smoothly, handing my silk coat to a passing attendant without breaking eye contact. "Maya invited me. She insisted I come and celebrate." Barbara's eyes darted toward her daughter, who was deliberately ignoring her from the other side of the patio, sipping sparkling water and watching us with a knowing smirk. Barbara's jaw tightened dangerously. She could not forcefully eject me without causing a massive public scene which she hated more than anything in the world. But she adamantly refused to lose control of her staged event. She turned abruptly to a young catering server holding a heavy silver tray of champagne flutes. "You there," Barbara snapped at the young man, snapping her fingers directly in his face. "Take this woman's chair away from the main table immediately. In fact, remove her fine china place setting entirely. The hired help and uninvited crashers can eat their lunch standing up in the kitchen. She is absolutely not sitting with my family today." The young server froze, his eyes widening in terror, caught directly between a wealthy, aggressive woman and his catering job. He tentatively reached for the beautifully decorated chair at the end of the long table. Put the chair exactly where it was, son, a deep, commanding voice boomed across the patio. Dr. Marcus stepped out from the massive glass patio doors, his physical presence instantly silencing the immediate area. Marcus was a towering, imposing man who carried the quiet, absolute authority of a chief of surgery who saved lives daily. He walked directly toward Barbara, his dark eyes fixed on her with a mixture of profound disgust and absolute zero tolerance. Barbara stammered quickly, trying to arrange her face into a pleasant motherly smile, waving her hand dismissively. I was just handling a minor seating issue. Chloe seems to have crashed Jessica's shower, and I was simply directing her to a more appropriate area so she would not embarrass herself. Marcus did not raise his voice, but the deadly freezing calm in his tone made several nearby guests stop talking and turn around. Chloe did not crash anything, Barbara. My wife and I invited her. She is a highly respected and welcome guest in our home. Barbara scoffed, her mask slipping yet again as her entitlement flared. She does not belong at the main table with our family, Marcus. It is entirely inappropriate and highly stressful for Jessica to have her husband's bitter ex-wife hovering around like a vulture. It is bad for the baby. Marcus stepped closer, towering over his mother-in-law, casting a long shadow over her petty cruelty. Let me make something crystal clear to you right now, Barbara. You do not dictate who sits where in my house. You do not speak to the hardworking catering staff I hired like they are stray dogs. And you absolutely do not disrespect my guests under my roof. Barbara gasped, clutching her heavy pearl necklace as if she had been physically struck. I am the grandmother of this child. I am David's mother. You will not speak to me this way in front of my prominent friends. Your friends are drinking my imported champagne on my patio, Marcus replied, his voice dropping to a lethal quiet register. Maya only agreed to host this ridiculous circus because she knew you would try to turn it into a country club fashion show to impress people who do not actually care about you. But I am the one paying the bill for every single rose and every single appetizer here today. Chloe is not eating in the kitchen. In fact, Chloe is going to sit right next to Maya at the absolute head of the table as our official guest of honor. Barbara's face turned a mottled, furious shade of red. She opened her mouth to argue, but Marcus cut her off with a single raised finger. If you say one more disrespectful word to Chloe, Marcus warned, his gaze boring directly into Barbara's shrinking soul, or if you snap your fingers at another worker in my home, I will personally have my private security escort you off my property. You can explain to your high society friends exactly why you were kicked out of your own grandchild's baby shower. Do we understand each other? The utter humiliation on Barbara's face was a priceless masterpiece. Her entire life revolved around projecting a flawless image of untouchable superiority, and Marcus had just publicly dismantled it in front of Seattle's wealthiest gossips. She looked around frantically, but the guests who had overheard the exchange were suddenly very interested in inspecting their manicures and swirling their champagne flutes. Barbara swallowed hard, her throat visibly bobbing. She offered a tight, jerky nod, entirely unable to muster a single word of defiance. She turned and practically fled toward the other side of the yard, hiding herself among a group of oblivious attendees near the dessert table. Marcus turned to me, the cold anger instantly vanishing from his face, replaced by a warm, welcoming smile. Chloe, he said, offering me his arm. You look spectacular. Maya has been waiting for you. Let me show you to your seat. I took his arm, letting him lead me directly past Jessica's absurd wicker throne. Jessica stared at me, her eyes wide with panicked confusion, as the chief of surgery and the host of her extravagant party personally seated me at the absolute best table on the patio. I took my seat, unfolding my crisp linen napkin and placing it gently on my lap. I looked across the manicured lawn just as David arrived through the side security gate. He was carrying a stack of oversized, expensive gift boxes, trying to look like the successful providing patriarch. But I could see the truth. He looked exhausted, his tie slightly crooked, the heavy, suffocating burden of the predatory bridge loans he had just signed already dragging down his posture. I lifted my crystal glass of sparkling water in a silent, mocking toast toward him. He had no idea that the woman sitting comfortably at the head of the table being served gourmet appetizers in his sister's mansion was the exact same woman who now held the deed to his entire financial existence. The trap was fully set, and they were all sitting comfortably right inside the cage. As the afternoon sun bathed the patio in a warm golden glow, Barbara simply could not resist the overwhelming urge to reclaim the spotlight. She stood up from her seat aggressively, tapping a heavy silver spoon against her crystal champagne flute. The sharp ringing sound demanded the immediate attention of the entire party. She beamed painting on a picture of manufactured aristocratic grace, deliberately avoiding Marcus's stern gaze, as she focused her entire attention on David and Jessica. Thank you all for being here to celebrate the continuation of our extraordinary family line, Barbara announced, her voice projecting with theatrical pride. David has always been destined for absolute greatness. He is a true visionary, blessed with the unstoppable drive and superior genetics that have defined our family's legacy for generations. We are an unstoppable force of wealth and innovation in this city. And now, seeing him build his massive new commercial empire while preparing to raise his firstborn son in that spectacular new mansion, it is clear that our family's future is brighter and more prosperous than ever before. To David, Jessica, and the undeniable power of our legacy. The guests politely raised their glasses, murmuring their congratulations. David puffed out his chest, his ego swelling to grotesque proportions as he basked in his mother's delusional praise. I raised my glass of sparkling water right along with them, taking a slow, refreshing sip. The sheer irony of Barbara bragging about their unstoppable wealth while I legally owned every single asset her son possessed was a sweeter vintage than any champagne on that table. When the catered lunch concluded, the time came for the grand spectacle of the gift exchange. Jessica sat on her wicker throne, eagerly tearing into massive boxes wrapped in imported silk ribbons. There were sterling silver rattles, hand-woven cashmere baby blankets, and absurdly expensive designer infant clothes that the child would outgrow in a matter of weeks. As the pile of pastel wrapping paper grew, I stood up from my seat next to Maya and approached the throne. The chatter on the patio instantly died down. Every pair of eyes locked onto me, anticipating a scene. I did not bring a massive, ostentatious box. Instead, I reached into my clutch and pulled out a sleek, matte black envelope entirely unmarked and sealed with a simple wax stamp. I extended my arm, offering the envelope to my former best friend. "For you, Jessica," I said, my voice perfectly smooth and pleasant. "I put a lot of careful thought into this. I think it is exactly what you and David deserve for your new life together. However, it is a very personal, highly valuable gift. I highly recommend you open it in private. It is entirely too sensitive for public consumption." Jessica's eyes lit up with immediate, uncontrollable greed. The prospect of something highly valuable and exclusive was a temptation she simply could not resist. She snatched the heavy envelope from my hand, her manicured fingers gripping the matte paper. "Thank you, Chloe," she replied, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Excuse me for just one moment, everyone. I simply must see what this is." She hoisted herself up from the wicker chair and waddled awkwardly across the patio, slipping through the massive glass doors into the quiet, air-conditioned hallway of the mansion. I waited exactly 30 seconds before quietly excusing myself, slipping through a side door to follow her. I found Jessica standing in the opulent marble hallway, staring down at the thick stack of legal documents she had just pulled from the envelope. Her hands were shaking so violently that the heavy watermarked paper was rattling. The color had completely drained from her face, leaving her looking sickly and translucent. On the very top page, printed in bold, undeniable legal formatting, were the words, "Notice of default and intent to foreclose." It detailed exactly how David had missed the massive mandatory first balloon payment on his predatory bridge loan. It detailed the accelerated interest penalties that had immediately taken effect. And most importantly, it listed the primary collateral that was now subject to immediate seizure by Phoenix Holdings, their brand new $10 million marital mansion. Jessica looked up, her eyes wide with a frantic, suffocating panic. She saw me standing at the end of the hall. She looked down at the document, specifically at the creditor's signature line. Then she looked back up at me. The realization hit her like a speeding freight train. Phoenix Holdings was not just some faceless, aggressive Wall Street equity firm. Phoenix Holdings was me. You, Jessica gasped, the paper slipping from her trembling fingers and scattering across the polished marble floor. You bought his debt. You own the loan on our house. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, my heels clicking sharply against the stone. David thought he could fund a billion-dollar mall project with empty pockets and a fake reputation. I said, my voice echoing coldly in the empty hall. He signed the worst bridge loan in the history of commercial real estate to buy that ridiculous mansion and fund his little vanity project. And I bought that paper for pennies on the dollar. You do not have an unstoppable family legacy, Jessica. You have an eviction notice. I own the roof over your head, and by the end of the month I am taking it. Jessica let out a strangled, animalistic sound. She lunged forward, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength, and yanked me forcefully through the nearest open door. We stumbled into the lavish, expansive guest bathroom. She slammed the heavy oak door shut behind us and locked it, her chest heaving as she hyperventilated. "You cannot do this, Chloe," Jessica wheezed, backing me against the cold tile wall. "We are having a baby. You cannot put a pregnant woman out on the street. You are just bitter. You are just a jealous, barren ex-wife trying to ruin my happiness because you could never give David a child yourself." I looked at her, entirely unmoved by her pathetic, weaponized tears. "I am not ruining your happiness, Jessica. I am simply foreclosing on a bad investment. You wanted my life. You stole my husband. You took my job. You are wearing my dead grandmother's emerald necklace right now. You wanted everything I had. Well, congratulations. You get his debt too." The desperate panic in Jessica's eyes suddenly vanished, replaced by something entirely feral and deeply malicious. The mask of the distressed, innocent, expectant mother shattered completely, revealing the ruthless, calculating thief I had covered for back in college. She let go of my wrist and took a step back, her breathing miraculously steadying. "You are not taking my house, Chloe," Jessica hissed, her voice dropping to a dangerous, deadly whisper. "You are going to tear up that foreclosure notice right now, or I swear to God I will ruin you permanently." I raised an eyebrow, genuinely curious about what pathetic leverage she thought she had left. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Jessica reached up with both hands and grabbed the collar of her expensive maternity dress. With a violent, sudden jerk, she ripped the fabric downward, tearing the seam and exposing her shoulder. She grabbed her own forearm, scratching her manicured nails hard enough into her skin to draw thin lines of bright red blood. "I will unlock that door," Jessica said, her eyes wide with absolute terrifying insanity. "I will walk out to the top of those grand marble stairs in the foyer. I will throw myself headfirst down the steps. I will bleed on the floor. I will lose this baby, and when the paramedics arrive, I will look Mayor Harrison and the police straight in the eye and tell them that you pushed me out of pure, bitter jealousy. You will spend the rest of your miserable life in a concrete cell for murdering my unborn child. Now tear up the papers." Jessica did not hesitate for a single second. She threw her head back and let out a blood-curdling, agonizing scream that pierced the thick oak door and echoed violently through the opulent marble corridors of the mansion. She hurled her body forward, dropping heavily onto the cold tile floor in a tangled, sobbing heap. She clutched her stomach tightly, her torn designer dress exposing the angry red, self-inflicted scratches on her shoulder and arm. Before I could even shift my weight, the bathroom door was forcefully shoved open. Barbara burst into the room, her eyes wide with manufactured theatrical horror. She had clearly been hovering right outside in the hallway, eagerly waiting for the perfect excuse to intervene and exert her dominance. Barbara gasped dramatically, falling to her knees beside her weeping daughter-in-law. She pulled her smartphone from her expensive clutch with shaking hands, jabbing the screen to dial emergency services, while screaming directly at my face. "You absolute monster!" Barbara shrieked, her voice echoing perfectly to ensure the gathering crowd of wealthy socialites outside the bathroom could hear every single syllable. You pushed her. You attacked a pregnant woman out of pure spite. I am going to see you locked away for the rest of your miserable, pathetic life. I leaned casually against the polished marble sink, crossing my arms over my chest. I did not raise my hands in surrender. I did not beg them to listen to reason, or desperately try to explain myself to the gathering crowd. I simply watched them perform their desperate, transparent play with absolute chilling silence. Operator. Yes, we need police and an ambulance immediately. Barbara yelled into the phone, her voice quivering with fake tears. My pregnant daughter-in-law was just violently assaulted by a deranged woman in our home. Before you finalize that false police report, Barbara, I said, my voice cutting through her hysterical performance like a freshly sharpened scalpel. You might want to instruct your daughter-in-law to look up. I pointed a single steady finger toward the ornate custom crown molding near the ceiling. Tucked discreetly inside the elegant filigree pattern of the air vent was a tiny, steady blinking red light. Jessica stopped mid-sob. Her tear-filled eyes darted upward, locking instantly onto the dark, unblinking lens. Marcus was a highly cautious, fiercely protective man. When Maya became pregnant, he had quietly installed a state-of-the-art high-definition security system in every public space, hallway, and guest bathroom of his estate to monitor the household staff and ensure his family's absolute safety. Every single camera recorded crystal-clear audio and video directly to an encrypted offshore cloud server. You really only have one pathetic playbook, do you not? Jessica, I asked, looking down at her frozen, terrified form on the floor. I remember the summer we turned 22. You convinced Michael you were carrying his baby just so he would pay off your maxed-out credit cards before he moved to Chicago for law school. You bought fake ultrasound photos online and cried on my dorm room floor exactly like you are crying right now. I kept your filthy, manipulative secret back then because I was naive enough to think you were just a scared, insecure girl making a desperate mistake. But faking a violent physical assault and attempting to frame me for a felony on high-definition video is guaranteed prison time. The distant wail of sirens quickly grew louder, cutting sharply through the shocked murmurs of the baby shower guests who were now packed tightly into the hallway. Within minutes, 2 uniformed police officers pushed their way through the throng of wealthy Seattle elite, their hands resting cautiously on their utility belts as they assessed the chaotic scene. "Arrest her immediately," Barbara shrieked, pointing a trembling accusatory finger directly at my chest, completely ignoring my warning about the camera. She attacked my daughter-in-law. She tried to kill my unborn grandson. Before the officers could even take a single step toward me, Marcus shoved his way to the front of the crowd, his face resembling a thundercloud. He held his large tablet firmly in his hand, the screen glowing brightly in the dim hallway. "Officers, wait!" Marcus commanded, his deep voice radiating the absolute authority of a chief of surgery taking control of an operating room. No one attacked anyone. My security cameras caught the entire interaction. I have the unedited, time-stamped footage right here. He turned the tablet around, displaying the crisp, high-resolution video for the police. The officers leaned in, watching the screen closely. Barbara and Jessica watched in paralyzing, muted horror as the video clearly showed Jessica dragging me forcefully into the bathroom, locking the door, threatening me, ripping her own expensive maternity dress, and dragging her own manicured nails across her skin to draw blood before throwing herself onto the floor. The audio was flawless, capturing every single malicious extortionist threat Jessica had hissed at me about faking a miscarriage to send me to a concrete cell. One of the police officers let out a heavy, irritated sigh of absolute disgust. He turned his stern, uncompromising gaze down to Jessica, who was still sprawled awkwardly on the tile floor. "Ma'am, filing a false police report is a severe crime," the officer stated coldly. "Attempting to frame an innocent person for a violent felony is punishable by significant jail time. Stand up right now." The crushing reality of the situation crashed over Jessica like a concrete wall. There was no charming her way out of this trap. She could not bat her eyelashes, shed a few tears, and play the fragile victim. The unshakable digital evidence of her sociopathic behavior was playing on a loop in the hands of her wealthy brother-in-law, broadcast directly to the police and the gaping crowd of high society guests standing right outside the door. Her grand, luxurious life, the stolen mansion currently in foreclosure, and her pristine reputation were evaporating into thin air all at once. Panic, raw, suffocating, and absolute seized Jessica's entire body. Her breath came in short, jagged, hyperventilating gasps. Her eyes rolled back wildly as the sheer terror of impending prison time and total, unavoidable financial ruin short-circuited her nervous system. The stress of the exposed lie pushed her body far beyond its physical limits. She grabbed her swollen stomach, her knuckles turning stark white. This time the scream that ripped from her throat was not a calculated theatrical performance for Barbara's benefit. It was a guttural, primal shriek of genuine, blinding physical agony. A sudden dark wetness spread rapidly across the ruined fabric of her torn dress, pooling heavily onto the pristine white marble floor. The overwhelming surge of adrenaline and extreme physiological stress had violently triggered a cascade of heavy, unstoppable contractions. Her water had just broken weeks ahead of schedule. The chaotic blur of flashing red and blue lights illuminated the mansion's massive glass doors as the paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. Jessica was sobbing hysterically, her hands clutching her stomach as she was strapped down and wheeled rapidly out of the sprawling Bellevue estate. The sickeningly lavish baby shower had instantly morphed into a frantic medical emergency. I stood near the edge of the patio, sipping my sparkling water, watching the ambulance tear out of the driveway. The trap had snapped shut, and the poison of her own deception was now coursing through her veins. Fast forward exactly 1 week. The timeline had finally caught up to the days immediately preceding our tense divorce settlement in the mahogany boardroom. Jessica had not lost the baby, but the extreme, terrifying stress of her exposed lies had nearly cost her everything. The doctors had managed to halt the premature labor, but the diagnosis was absolute. She was confined to immediate strict bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. Of course, a standard hospital room was entirely unacceptable for David's fragile, high-maintenance new wife. He had aggressively demanded she be placed in the hospital's exclusive VIP maternity wing, a sprawling hotel-style penthouse suite that catered specifically to Seattle's ultra-wealthy elite. The cost was an astronomical $50,000 up front. David stood furiously at the hospital billing counter, his expensive tailored suit looking slightly rumpled. He slammed his heavy metal corporate credit card onto the counter. The billing clerk swiped it, frowned, and swiped it again. Declined. The clerk stated softly, sliding the card back across the marble counter. David's face flushed a deep, ugly crimson. He snatched the card, cursing under his breath, and practically threw his personal black card at the woman. "Try this one. Your machine is obviously malfunctioning." The clerk ran the black card. The machine beeped a harsh, unforgiving negative tone. "Declined, sir. I am afraid all of these accounts are showing a hard freeze." David gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles turning stark white. He did not realize it yet, but the aggressive bridge loan he had signed for his vanity mega mall project had officially gone into severe default. My proxy lawyers at Phoenix Holdings had ruthlessly executed the immediate asset freeze. Every single bank account tied to his name, his business, and his newly purchased mansion was entirely locked down. He was completely cut off from his cash supply, standing in an expensive hospital without a single usable dollar to his name. Desperation is a highly motivating emotion. David pivoted away from the billing desk and marched directly toward the chief of surgery's corner office. He bypassed the receptionist and shoved the heavy glass door open, storming into Marcus's private sanctuary. Marcus was reviewing patient charts, his crisp white lab coat pristine, his demeanor radiating quiet, absolute authority. He looked up, his dark eyes instantly hardening at the sight of his entitled brother-in-law. "Marcus, I need you to fix a ridiculous administrative error immediately," David demanded, pacing the length of the office like a caged animal. "The billing department is trying to charge me a $50,000 deposit for Jessica's VIP suite, and my bank is putting a temporary security hold on my accounts. You are the chief of surgery. Tell them to waive the deposit. Comp the room. Put it under your executive discretionary budget. Marcus slowly placed his pen down on his desk. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together, and stared at David with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. I am not waiving a single cent. David, Marcus replied, his deep voice dropping to a lethal freezing temperature. You walked into my hospital, demanded our most expensive luxury suite, and now you expect me to abuse my professional authority to foot the bill because you cannot manage your own finances. We are family, Marcus, David shouted, slamming his hand onto the edge of the desk. You owe us. My mother hosted your wedding. My firm helped secure the zoning for this very hospital wing. You need to pull some strings and make this disappear. Marcus stood up, his massive frame towering over David, instantly stripping away every ounce of David's unearned bravado. Let me give you a brutal reality check right now, Marcus stated coldly. 2 years ago, at your mother's Thanksgiving dinner, Barbara sat at the head of the table and loudly complained that Maya and my children would dilute your precious superior family genetics. She called my beautiful biracial kids a tragic stain on the family portrait. And you sat there eating your turkey and said absolutely nothing. You let her spew her racist venom without a single word of defense for your own sister or your niece and nephew. You do not get to invoke the word family to me ever again. David swallowed hard, physically taking a step back as the sheer force of Marcus's anger radiated through the room. I will not throw your wife out into the street because she requires medical supervision, Marcus continued, opening his desk drawer and pulling out a thick legal document. But you are not getting a free luxury vacation on my watch. This is a legally binding medical promissory note. It holds you entirely personally liable for every single medical expense incurred in that VIP suite at an accelerated interest rate. You will sign this right now, or Jessica will be moved to a standard shared ward within the next 5 minutes. David's jaw clenched so tightly a muscle ticked violently in his cheek. His ego was trapped in a vice. He knew if Jessica was downgraded to a standard room, her wealthy friends would find out immediately. The illusion of his vast empire would crack. He snatched the pen from Marcus's desk and hastily scrawled his signature across the bottom of the document, blindly tying an incredibly heavy new anchor of debt around his own neck. He threw the pen down and stormed out of the office without another word. An hour later, Marcus entered Jessica's VIP suite. Jessica lay back against the plush high-thread count pillows, looking pale and exhausted, her phone resting on her chest. Marcus approached her bedside, holding a sterile medical tray. Just a routine procedure, Jessica, Marcus said, his voice entirely professional, devoid of any familial warmth. Given your premature labor scare and the extreme stress on your body, I need to take a comprehensive blood panel to ensure your hormone levels and the baby's vitals are completely stable. Jessica nodded weakly, too tired to argue. She extended her arm. Marcus efficiently tied the tourniquet, sterilized the crook of her elbow, and carefully inserted the needle. The small plastic vial quickly filled with dark crimson blood. He swapped it for a second vial, ensuring he had an ample sample. Marcus removed the needle, pressing a small cotton bandage to her skin. He labeled the vials meticulously, his eyes briefly flicking toward the door where David was pacing in the hallway. Marcus placed the vials into a secure lockbox. He walked out of the room carrying the literal biological truth of their entire existence in his hands. The blood work was routine, but the advanced genetic panel he was running on it was highly specific. The final devastating nail in their coffin was officially at the lab. The sterile fluorescent lights of the hospital parking garage hummed overhead as I pulled my car into Marcus's reserved spot. It was nearly midnight. My phone had vibrated 40 minutes earlier with a cryptic, highly urgent text from my brother-in-law demanding my immediate presence in his secure office. The lab results had finally returned. I bypassed the sleepy security guard using the master access badge Maya had given me and took the private elevator directly to the executive wing. Marcus was sitting behind his massive oak desk. His office plunged into deep shadow, except for the harsh blue glow of his dual computer monitors. He did not say a single word as I walked in and locked the heavy wooden door behind me. He simply swiveled one of the monitors toward the empty leather guest chair. I sat down, my eyes immediately scanning the dense rows of medical terminology cellular counts and highlighted genetic markers. "I am a corporate equity shark, Marcus," I said, leaning forward to inspect the screen. "You are going to have to translate this advanced medical jargon for me. What exactly are we looking at here?" Marcus steepled his fingers, his expression a mask of cold, calculated precision. "We are looking at the absolute, irreversible destruction of David's fragile little universe," he stated flatly. When Jessica experienced her initial cramping and panic attacks last week, I ordered a comprehensive prenatal panel. It is a standard procedure to test maternal blood to isolate cell-free fetal DNA. We do it primarily to check for genetic abnormalities, but it also gives us a flawless, undeniable map of the child's basic biological profile. He tapped an expensive silver pen against the glass of the monitor, highlighting a specific row of raw data. "I want you to think back, Chloe. Tell me the exact timeline of their affair. When did David officially move out of your house? And when did Jessica publicly announce her miraculous pregnancy?" I crossed my legs, my mind instantly snapping back to those miserable gaslit months. "David packed his bags the first week of October." I replied, my voice perfectly steady, completely stripped of the agonizing pain that used to accompany that memory. He claimed he desperately needed space to find himself. During that exact same month, Jessica kept taking mysterious weekend trips to Portland for what she called freelance consulting seminars. She announced her pregnancy 6 weeks later, right before Thanksgiving. They paraded into Barbara's holiday dinner, claiming it was fate, a happy accident that proved they were cosmically meant to be together. Marcus nodded slowly, pulling a physical manila file from his locked desk drawer. "A happy accident," he echoed mockingly. "Let us look at the cold, hard biology of this supposed fate. I have been David's primary care physician for nearly a decade. I have his complete, detailed medical history on file. David is blood type O, negative. I checked Jessica's intake records from her previous cosmetic surgeries. She is also blood type O, negative." He leaned over the heavy desk, his dark eyes locking onto mine with lethal, unwavering intensity. "Do you remember basic high school biology, Chloe? Two parents with type O blood can only produce a child with type O blood. It is an absolute dominant genetic rule. There are no exceptions. There are no spontaneous medical miracles." I looked back at the glowing computer screen. The line Marcus had highlighted was displaying the fetal blood typing isolated from the maternal draw. The bold black letters stared back at me in stark, undeniable contrast. "The baby is type AB." I whispered, the sheer magnitude of the revelation washing over me like a tidal wave of freezing water. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, crossing his arms over his broad chest. "It is biologically, medically, and scientifically impossible for David to be the father of that child." The silence in the sprawling office was deafening. I stared at the medical data as a slow, sharp smile began to spread across my face. The irony was so incredibly potent, it was almost intoxicating. Jessica had spent years plotting, scheming, and lying to steal my wealthy, supposedly successful husband. She had orchestrated a flawless campaign of deceit, played the devoted, understanding soulmate, and happily destroyed my entire marriage to secure her permanent place in the aristocratic family she so desperately craved. And the entire time she was wrapping David around her little finger, she was sleeping with someone else. She cheated on the man she stole. I laughed, the bright sound echoing coldly off the sterile hospital walls. "She is a pathological serial opportunist. She secured David's bank accounts, but clearly some other man was keeping her entertained in Portland while David was busy running his company into the ground." "The real question now," Marcus said, tapping his pen rhythmically against his desk, "is exactly how we deploy this highly volatile information. I cannot legally release her medical records to the public or hand them to a lawyer. HIPAA laws are absolute, and I will not risk my medical license or my hospital's sterling reputation for a petty family squabble." Furthermore, if I just hand this data to David directly in private, he will instantly bury it. His fragile ego simply cannot handle it. He will pay off whoever he needs to pay off force Jessica into terrified compliance and raise the child as his own, just to avoid the public humiliation of being cuckolded by his own mistress. I stood up, pacing the length of the dark office as the gears in my mind rapidly spun. "You are absolutely right," I said, my heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. "If we hand this to him quietly, Barbara will sweep it under the rug to protect her precious, untouchable family image. They will close ranks and pretend nothing happened. We cannot just give them the weapon. We have to detonate it in a public arena where they cannot possibly contain the blast radius." I stopped by the large window looking out over the sleeping, rain-slicked city. "The bridge loan default is officially active," I stated, laying out the tactical pieces on our mental chessboard. "My equity firm holds the absolute deed to their new mansion. In less than 30 days, the eviction notice goes entirely public. The county sheriffs will literally drag them out onto the curb. But that is just financial ruin. It is simply not enough. We need to shatter the psychological foundation of their entire existence." Marcus smiled, a chilling, predatory expression that perfectly mirrored my own dark satisfaction. "Maya is hosting a massive high-profile charity gala next month," he noted smoothly. "Barbara has already aggressively strong-armed her way onto the planning committee. She is personally inviting every major political donor, every hospital board member, and every wealthy society gossip in Seattle. She plans to use the grand event to officially introduce David and his pregnant wife to the absolute upper echelon of the city's elite." It was the perfect, inescapable arena. A locked ballroom full of the exact people Barbara and David desperately needed to impress. There would be no quiet escape. There would be no sweeping the ugly truth under a designer rug. "We do not release the medical records," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, calculated whisper. "We compel Jessica to confess. We back her into a corner so tight, so completely suffocating and inescapable, that she has to scream the truth herself in front of everyone. We use the foreclosure as the hammer and the DNA as the nail." Marcus closed the file on his desk, locking it securely back inside his bottom drawer. He handed me a single heavily encrypted flash drive containing the isolated lab report data. "Keep this safe," he instructed. "The trap is fully built, Chloe. Now we just have to guide the rats directly into the center of the maze." I slipped the drive into my tailored pocket, the cold metal feeling heavy and immensely powerful against my palm. Jessica thought she had won the ultimate prize. She had no idea she had just signed her own absolute destruction. The cold metal of the flash drive remained a heavy, comforting weight in my pocket as the chaotic blur of the past week slammed violently back into the blinding reality of the present. The sterile, heavily sanitized air of the hospital maternity ward instantly replaced the dim conspiratorial shadows of Marcus's office. We were right back where the nightmare had accelerated just hours ago. Jessica was currently screaming behind the heavy double doors of the delivery room, her premature labor progressing with terrifying speed following her catastrophic self-inflicted meltdown at the baby shower. I stood quietly at the end of the long, brightly lit corridor. My tailored crimson pantsuit unwrinkled my composure absolute. 20 feet away, David was completely falling apart. The golden boy of Seattle real estate looked like a feral, cornered animal. His expensive silk tie was yanked loose, his custom blazer was discarded haphazardly on a plastic waiting room chair, and a thick sheen of panicked sweat coated his forehead. He was pacing furiously back and forth across the linoleum, entirely ignoring the agonizing screams of his wife echoing from the secure delivery suite. His smartphone vibrated violently in his hand. He practically snatched it to his ear, his voice sharp and ragged. "Greg, tell me you fixed the banking error. Tell me the security freeze is lifted right now." Even from 20 feet away, I could hear the tinny, frantic voice of his lead accountant bleating loudly through the receiver. "It is not an error," David, the accountant, practically sobbed, his voice trembling with sheer, unadulterated panic. "It is a total hostile asset seizure. Phoenix Holdings executed the absolute default clause on your bridge loan 20 minutes ago. They triggered a commercial kill switch across the entire banking network. Every single cent in your business accounts your personal checking your offshore reserves. It is all completely frozen. The feds are looking at wire fraud implications because you cross-collateralized the funds. They are seizing the entire portfolio in exactly 24 hours. David stopped dead in his tracks. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a walking corpse. What do you mean? 24 hours, David hissed, his eyes darting wildly around the empty hallway. Greg, I am building a billion-dollar commercial mega mall. I have massive international investors flying in next week. You call the bank right now and you tell them to unlock my capital immediately. I cannot do anything, David, Greg shouted back, his panic escalating into pure hysteria. You leveraged every single asset you legally possess to buy that ridiculous mansion for Jessica. Phoenix Holdings legally owns the debt, the collateral, and your operating capital. You have absolutely nothing left. We cannot even make payroll tomorrow morning. You need to call Phoenix Holdings directly. Beg them for a stay of execution. Get an extension. It is the only option you have left before the entire company implodes. The line went dead. David stared at his phone, his chest heaving as he struggled to pull oxygen into his lungs. The impenetrable fortress of his inherited privilege had just been completely vaporized. He frantically dug his hand into his trousers, pulling out the crumpled, tear-stained notice of default that Jessica had dropped on the marble floor of Marcus's mansion earlier that afternoon. He smoothed the heavy legal paper out against the hospital wall, his manicured fingernails tracing the aggressive legal threats until he found the bold print at the very bottom of the page. It listed a direct priority contact number for the anonymous CEO of Phoenix Holdings. I watched his lips move silently as he rehearsed his pathetic, desperate pitch. I knew exactly what he was going to say. He was going to leverage his unborn child. He was going to invoke the sanctity of family. He was going to appeal to the very concept of basic human decency, a concept he had completely abandoned the day he decided to humiliate me and discard our entire marriage for a manipulative grifter. He punched the numbers into his phone with shaking, sweaty fingers. He pressed the device to his ear, his eyes squeezing shut as he listened to the line connect. It rang once. A split second later, a crisp, elegant marimba ringtone sliced sharply through the quiet hospital corridor. David opened his eyes. He lowered the phone slightly, his brow furrowing in severe irritation at the sudden interrupting noise. He looked down the hallway, his gaze finally landing directly on me. It rang twice. I did not break eye contact. My expression remained a mask of absolute freezing calm. I slowly reached my hand into my designer leather bag. My fingers wrapped around the cool, sleek edge of my smartphone. I pulled it out into the harsh fluorescent light. The screen was glowing brightly, displaying David's personal cell phone number in bold black text. It rang a third time. David stared at me, his brain violently struggling to process the impossible colliding realities unfolding right in front of his face. The phone ringing in his ear was perfectly synchronized with the phone ringing in my hand. The mathematical impossibility of the situation was actively short-circuiting his mind. He took a hesitant, staggering step forward, his mouth opening to speak, but no words came out. I held his terrified, unblinking gaze. With a slow, deliberate motion, I swiped my thumb across the glass screen and pressed the green answer button. I raised the phone to my ear. "Hello, David?" I said, my voice projecting clearly down the hallway. He heard my voice echo through the physical space of the corridor, and a split second later, he heard the exact same greeting broadcast directly into his ear through the receiver of his own phone. The final, devastating realization crashed into him with the force of an exploding sun. His knees physically buckled, forcing him to grab the edge of a medical cart just to stay upright. His jaw practically unhinged as all the blood rushed out of his head. He looked down at the crumpled foreclosure document in his trembling hand, staring at the imposing, ruthless title of the corporate entity that now legally owned his entire existence. Phoenix Holdings. "You?" David choked out the single word, scraping against his vocal cords like broken glass. He dropped the phone, letting it dangle by his side as he stared at me in absolute, pure horror. I took a slow, measured step forward, the click of my heel echoing like a judge's gavel striking wood. "You wanted to talk to the CEO about human decency," David, I replied, my voice dripping with absolute lethal satisfaction. Go ahead. I am listening. Pitch me. Tell me exactly why I should not vaporize the rest of your miserable life. The color completely vanished from David's face, leaving his skin a sickly, translucent gray under the harsh fluorescent hospital lights. He stood absolutely paralyzed, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. The phone slipped from his trembling, sweaty fingers and clattered onto the polished linoleum floor. The metallic impact echoed loudly in the quiet corridor, but he did not even flinch. His eyes remained locked on me, entirely dilated, with a mixture of absolute terror and complete disbelief. He was finally seeing me, not as the docile, obedient wife he had so casually discarded, but as the ruthless apex predator who had systematically dismantled his entire world. You, he stammered, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched wheeze. Phoenix Holdings, you bought the debt. You set the collateral trap. I did not set a trap, David, I stated, stepping closer until I was standing mere feet away from him. I simply handed you a shovel, and you eagerly, arrogantly dug your own grave. You wanted to play the high-rolling real estate tycoon for your new mistress. You wanted to throw around vanity capital you did not actually possess. I just bought the paper you were so desperate to sign. Before David could form another coherent sentence, the heavy elevator doors at the end of the hall slid open with a soft chime. Barbara marched out, her expensive designer heels clicking aggressively against the floor. She wore a pristine Chanel suit, her face contoured into its usual expression of haughty, aristocratic disdain. She took one look at her golden boy son, leaning heavily against a medical cart, and instantly shifted into her overbearing protective matriarch routine. David, what on earth is going on? Barbara demanded, her sharp voice piercing the tense silence of the corridor. Jessica is making an absolute spectacle of herself in that delivery room, and you are out here having a panic attack. She stopped, her eyes finally landing on me. Her perfectly manicured eyebrows snapped together in immediate visceral fury. Chloe, what are you doing here? Have you lost your mind? Are you harassing my son on the day his child is being born? She marched over to David, stepping right over the dropped phone still glowing on the floor. She noticed the active call screen displaying my number. With a dramatic scoff of disgust, she snatched the phone up from the linoleum and shoved it directly into my face. I do not know what kind of pathetic, desperate stunt you think you are pulling, Chloe. Barbara snarled, her voice rising to an ugly, shrill pitch. But you are completely out of your league. If you think you can use some cheap corporate blackmail to terrorize my son, you are deeply mistaken. I sit on the board of every major charity in Seattle. I have the mayor on speed dial. I have elite society connections that will absolutely obliterate your miserable little career. I will have you blacklisted from every single financial firm on the West Coast. I will ensure you never work in this city again. I looked at Barbara's flushed, furious face, then shifted my gaze to David's terrified, crumbling posture. The absolute absurdity of their unearned arrogance finally broke me. I threw my head back and laughed. It was not a polite, restrained chuckle. It was a loud, genuinely amused, icy laugh that echoed loudly down the sterile hospital hallway. Barbara recoiled physically, her hand dropping slightly as she stared at me, as if I had suddenly grown a second head. David just continued to hyperventilate, his eyes darting frantically between his mother and me. You are going to blacklist the CEO of Phoenix Holdings. Barbara, I asked, wiping a single tear of mirth from the corner of my eye. Please be my guest. Make those calls. I would absolutely love to hear you explain to the mayor how your brilliant superior son just managed to lose his entire company, his personal fortune, and his new Bellevue mansion in a single afternoon. What are you talking about? Barbara demanded, her voice losing a fraction of its absolute certainty. David owns the construction firm. He owns the Mega Mall project. He is a self-made titan. I slowly crossed my arms over my chest, my gaze locking onto David, pinning him to the wall like a biological specimen. He is not a titan, Barbara. He is an incredibly sloppy, illiterate amateur. Let us talk about the divorce papers, David. Do you remember those? The rushed, highly expedited settlement documents you practically shoved down my throat last year. You were in such an incredible hurry to finalize our separation so you could rush off and marry Jessica. You wanted a clean break. You wanted to keep your precious construction firm, and you offered me what you thought was a pathetic, insulting buyout just to make me disappear quickly. David swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing violently. I had my lawyers draft that agreement, he whispered defensively. It was ironclad. You signed away your rights to the firm. I signed exactly what my corporate attorneys rewrote. I corrected him, my voice dropping to a freezing, lethal register. You were too busy booking luxury trips to Portland with your mistress to actually read the fine print of the revised settlement. I did not forfeit my stake in your company, David. I executed a highly specific, totally legal shadow equity clause. I buried a corporate law loophole so deep inside Section 4 of that agreement that your lazy bargain bin lawyers completely missed it. Barbara looked frantically at David. David, what is she saying? Tell me she is lying. She is not lying, I answered for him, taking immense pleasure in watching the realization crush the last remaining ounce of hope out of his eyes. The settlement explicitly stated that I relinquished my direct personal shares in the original LLC. However, it transferred the overarching holding rights directly into a blind corporate trust, a trust fully owned and operated by Phoenix Holdings. You thought you were giving me a tiny slice of cash to walk away. In reality, you were signing over the total operational authority of the parent company. I stepped right into David's personal space, forcing him to look directly into my eyes. I did not walk away with nothing, David. I retained a 51% controlling interest in your entire corporate structure. I own the Mega Mall project. I own the construction firm. I own the bridge loan that you defaulted on this morning. I own every single asset you thought you possessed. David let out a ragged, choking sound, his hands flying up to grip his own hair. No, that is illegal. That is fraud. You cannot do this. It is perfectly legal, and the ink has been dry for 10 months, I stated with absolute unwavering finality. You have been walking around Seattle playing the big, powerful boss, bragging to your country club friends about your massive developments, but you do not own anything. You have never owned anything since the day you signed that paper. You are not a CEO, David. You are not a titan of industry. For the past entire year, you have been nothing more than my unwitting, heavily supervised, extremely disposable employee. I looked him up and down, taking in his ruined suit, his sweaty, panic-stricken face, and the absolute destruction of his ego. I let the silence hang in the air for a heavy, agonizing moment, ensuring that every single word I was about to say would permanently brand itself onto his memory. I pulled my shoulders back, radiating absolute total authority. You are fired. David stared at me, the finality of those 3 words echoing in the sterile hallway. You are fired. The concept was so entirely alien to him that his brain completely refused to process the audio. Barbara, however, processed it instantly. Her designer facade completely shattered. She stepped toward me, her hands balling into fists, her face twisting into an ugly mask of pure rage. She opened her mouth to scream another threat, but the heavy, measured footsteps of Marcus approaching from down the hall silenced her. David did not even notice his mother's humiliation. The paralysis that had gripped him suddenly shattered, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated animal panic. He completely abandoned the facade of the wealthy titan. He dropped to his knees right there on the polished hospital linoleum, ignoring the dirt and the indignity. He lunged toward the expensive leather briefcase he had discarded on a plastic waiting room chair earlier. His hands were trembling so violently he could barely manage the brass clasps. David, get up from the floor this instant, Barbara hissed, looking frantically around the empty corridor to ensure no one from her precious social circle was witnessing this absolute disgrace. Call our legal team. We will crush her in court. He completely ignored his mother. He ripped a sleek silver laptop from the briefcase and popped it open, balancing it awkwardly on his knees. The glow of the screen illuminated the sheer, pathetic desperation sweating out of his pores. I watched him hammer his login credentials, missing the keys twice, before finally accessing his desktop. I knew exactly what secure portal he was opening. He was logging directly into the primary operating account of the construction firm. My firm. "I need liquidity," he muttered, his voice manic, speaking rapidly to the computer screen rather than to us. "If the domestic accounts are freezing, I have a tiny window before the international routing shuts down. The bridge loan default triggers a domestic freeze, but the international wires have a built-in lag. I have an offshore contingency. I just need to move the reserve cash." I stood perfectly still, watching him execute his own digital execution. He was typing furiously, his eyes wide and unblinking, bypassing the dual authentication security prompts. I knew exactly how much capital was sitting in that specific reserve account. $2 million. It was the absolute last drop of liquid cash the company possessed, meant to cover the final critical vendor payouts for the Mega Mall project. He was trying to drain my company dry to save his own skin. "Done!" David gasped, hitting the enter key with a triumphant, sickeningly desperate slap. He looked up at me from the hospital floor, a manic, unhinged grin stretching across his pale, sweaty face. "You think you cornered me, Chloe? You think you hold all the cards? I just wired $2 million to a secure, completely untraceable shell account in the Cayman Islands. Your little holding company cannot touch international offshore trusts. I still have capital. I am not dead yet." I looked down at him, pity completely absent from my system. I slowly pulled my phone back out of my pocket and checked the glowing screen. "You are truly a marvel of profound incompetence, David," I stated, my voice echoing coldly down the corridor, slicing right through his pathetic moment of victory. "You just transferred $2 million of company funds to a personal offshore account. Tell me when you aggressively set up that Cayman Islands shell company last year to hide money during our divorce. What exact tax identification number did you use as the originating corporate entity?" His manic grin faltered instantly. A flicker of profound, creeping confusion crossed his bloodshot eyes. He looked down at his laptop, then back up at me. "I used the corporate LLC ID, the firm's operational tax ID." I nodded slowly, letting the gravity of his confession settle heavily into the space between us. "Yes, you used my original LLC tax identification number, the exact one I legally retained complete control over when I drafted the shadow equity clause, which means, legally speaking, you did not just move your own money to save your family. You just attempted to drain the central operating capital of an entity you absolutely do not own." I took a slow step closer, towering over him as he knelt on the floor. "I completely anticipated you would try to siphon the corporate reserves the second the domestic freeze hit. Desperate weak men always try to run with whatever cash they can carry. So exactly 48 hours ago, I proactively contacted the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. I officially flagged that specific tax ID and all associated international routing numbers for maximum security monitoring. I filed a sworn affidavit reporting suspected imminent embezzlement by a rogue employee." Barbara let out a sharp, genuine gasp of horror. Her hands flew to her mouth as her highly educated, socially elite brain finally calculated the absolute magnitude of the trap her son had just leaped into. "You did not just hide money, David," I continued, my voice sharp and entirely unforgiving. "You used a federally flagged corporate ID to execute an unauthorized international transfer of $2 million. You literally just committed federal wire fraud and grand larceny right in front of me using a public hospital Wi-Fi connection." My phone buzzed heavily in my hand. I turned the screen around and held it down so he could clearly see the automated bright red notification banner flashing across my display. "That is the federal banking alert," I announced, watching the last remaining color drain from his face. "The automated security system just intercepted your unauthorized transfer. The $2 million is permanently locked in international transit, and the federal authorities are actively tracing the IP address of the exact device that executed the fraud." David slammed the laptop shut as if the machine itself was suddenly burning his hands. He shoved it away across the linoleum floor, scrambling backward like a terrified, cornered animal. "You set me up!" He choked out his chest, heaving violently as he pointed a shaking finger at me. "You purposely made me do it." I did absolutely nothing, I replied, staring down at his pathetic, trembling form with absolute disdain. I simply stood here and watched you steal. I gave you the rope and you eagerly tied the noose. By this time tomorrow morning, the FBI will have an active warrant for your immediate arrest. You are facing 10 to 20 years in federal prison for international corporate embezzlement. You traded your freedom, your fortune, and your entire future for a woman who lied to you about carrying your own child. The digital clock mounted high on the sterile hospital wall blinked in bright red numerals. 7 minutes. Exactly 7 minutes had passed since David hit the enter key on his laptop, actively executing his own financial and legal suicide. David remained collapsed on the linoleum floor, his expensive suit soaking up the spilled coffee from a nearby overturned trash can. He was physically shaking, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps, as the sheer suffocating reality of his federal wire fraud charges completely paralyzed his nervous system. He could not speak. He could not move. He was entirely broken. Barbara, however, refused to surrender to the crushing weight of their new reality. Narcissists never accept defeat. They simply rewrite the narrative to preserve their delusional sense of superiority. She looked down at her hyperventilating son with a flash of genuine disgust, clearly repulsed by his sudden display of weakness, before turning her absolute undivided fury back toward me. She violently smoothed the lapels of her pristine Chanel jacket, lifting her chin to look down her nose at me. "You are a bitter, vindictive sociopath, Chloe." Barbara spat, her voice dripping with aristocratic venom. "You can steal his company. You can manipulate federal banking systems with your corporate loopholes. You can bankrupt us and throw us out of our homes. But you are ultimately fighting a losing battle. Money is just paper. Wealth can always be rebuilt. My son possesses something you will never ever have." She took a step closer, her perfectly manicured finger pointing directly at my chest. "Do you remember our Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago?" Barbara asked, her tone shifting into a sickeningly sweet, mocking cadence. "Do you remember when I told you that all your designer suits and corporate titles meant absolutely nothing because you were failing your primary biological duty? I told you that you were a barren, empty vessel. I told you that you were a dead end. And look at you now, a cold, lonely CEO standing in a maternity ward with nothing but a bank account to keep you warm at night." She turned her head proudly toward the heavy double doors of the delivery suite. Behind those doors, Jessica's screams had abruptly faded into exhausted silence. "My son is currently producing a true heir," Barbara declared, her chest swelling with unearned, arrogant pride. "He is securing the Sterling family legacy. Jessica is giving us a child carrying our superior elite genetics, a bloodline that will outlast whatever petty corporate revenge you think you have achieved tonight. You can take the money, Chloe. We are taking the future." The red light above the secure delivery room doors suddenly flashed a bright, vibrant green. The electronic lock disengaged with a heavy metallic clank. The 7-minute window was officially closed. Barbara instantly adjusted her posture, plastering a radiant, triumphant smile across her face. She stepped away from me, preparing to welcome the nurse eager to hold the physical manifestation of her precious superior genetics and shove her ultimate victory directly into my face. She opened her arms, waiting for the newborn wrapped in a sterile hospital blanket. The heavy doors swung outward. It was not a nurse holding a baby. It was not Marcus delivering the good news. A tall, broad-shouldered man, wearing a crisp, dark navy suit, stepped through the doorway. His face was entirely devoid of emotion, his posture radiating absolute, uncompromising authority. 2 uniformed police officers walked closely behind him, their hands resting cautiously on their utility belts. The man stopped precisely 2 feet in front of Barbara, completely ignoring her outstretched, welcoming arms. He reached inside his tailored jacket pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. With a swift, practiced motion, he flipped it open, the harsh fluorescent lights reflecting off a heavy, solid gold badge. "David Sterling." The man stated, his voice a deep, resonant boom that instantly shattered the quiet tension of the hallway. He looked past Barbara, his eyes locking onto David, who was still kneeling pathetically on the floor. "I am Special Agent Miller with the Federal Bureau of Investigation Financial Crimes Division." Barbara lowered her arms, her triumphant smile freezing into a mask of pure, unadulterated confusion. "Excuse me," she snapped, her elite entitlement automatically flaring up. "This is a private, secure maternity ward. My son's wife just gave birth. You cannot simply barge in here. I demand to speak with the hospital administrator immediately." Agent Miller did not even blink at her. He bypassed her completely, stepping over David's discarded laptop and stopping right in front of my former husband. "David Sterling, you are under arrest for international wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and violation of federal banking statutes," Agent Miller announced coldly. "We intercepted an unauthorized transfer of $2 million initiated from this exact IP address, utilizing a federally flagged corporate tax identification number." The two uniformed officers stepped forward instantly. They grabbed David by his arms and hauled him roughly to his feet. David did not fight them. He hung limp in their grasp, his eyes completely vacant, a man whose soul had already evacuated his body. The sharp metallic click of the steel handcuffs locking around his wrists echoed with finality. "Wait!" Barbara screamed, finally breaking her composure, her voice cracking into a shrill, desperate shriek. "You cannot do this. He is a father. His son was just born. You cannot arrest a man before he even holds his own newborn child. I will call the mayor. I will call the governor. You are making a massive career-ending mistake." A deep, mocking laugh sounded from the delivery room doorway. Marcus stepped out of the shadows looking immaculate in his white chief of surgery coat. He was holding a thick manila folder in his hands. He looked at Barbara with an expression of such intense, concentrated disgust that she physically recoiled. "He is not going to be holding anyone's son today," Barbara Marcus stated, his voice ringing with absolute clinical precision. "And speaking of career-ending mistakes and superior family genetics, I think it is time we addressed your precious, untouchable legacy." Marcus opened the manila folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper featuring a bright, colorful laboratory header. "I just personally reviewed the advanced genetic panel drawn from Jessica's blood work last week," Marcus announced to the hallway, completely ignoring the federal agents who were now standing quietly watching the drama unfold. "I ran a specific fetal cell isolation sequence. The science is absolute. It is undeniable." David slowly lifted his head, his tear-filled eyes focusing on Marcus. "David is blood type O negative." Marcus continued, projecting his voice so every single person in the corridor could hear him perfectly. "Jessica is blood type O negative. But the child Jessica just delivered behind those doors has an AB blood type." Barbara stopped breathing. She stared at Marcus, her mouth hanging open, the high society matriarch completely short-circuiting as the basic irrefutable laws of biology registered in her brain. "That is scientifically impossible," Marcus concluded, slamming the folder shut with a sharp echoing snap. "That child carries absolutely 0% of your precious sterling genetics. Jessica has been sleeping with another man for the entirety of her pregnancy. Your son just committed a massive federal felony, lost his entire corporate empire, and threw away his freedom to finance a luxury lifestyle for another man's baby." David let out a harrowing, guttural scream. It was the sound of a man watching his entire universe collapse into dust. He lunged wildly toward the delivery room doors, fighting against the solid grip of the police officers screaming Jessica's name in pure, unhinged agony. The officers easily subdued him, pinning his arms behind his back and marching him forcefully toward the elevators. Barbara stood entirely alone in the center of the hallway. Her Chanel suit suddenly looked cheap. Her posture was completely broken. Her golden boy was being hauled off to federal prison, her stolen wealth was gone, and her highly anticipated elite bloodline was revealed to be nothing more than a spectacular, humiliating biological fraud. I adjusted the strap of my designer bag on my shoulder. I walked slowly past Barbara, not even bothering to look at her shattered, trembling face. I pressed the elevator call button, watching the numbers light up as the car descended. The trap had executed perfectly. The vengeance was absolute, and I had a billion-dollar company to run in the morning. The brass elevator doors slid open with a soft, cheerful electronic chime, but I did not step inside. I could not deny myself the absolute intoxicating satisfaction of watching the final pathetic act of this manufactured tragedy unfold. I let the elevator doors slide shut again, turning my body back toward the brightly lit corridor, just as Barbara completely snapped. She physically threw herself into the direct path of the federal agents. Her arms spread wide, her pristine Chanel suit violently wrinkling as she transformed from an elite, untouchable socialite into a feral, desperate animal defending her cornered young. Special Agent Sterling of the FBI Financial Crimes Unit stepped forward, his broad shoulders easily dwarfing Barbara's frame. He was accompanied by Dr. Marcus, who hung back slightly observing the chaos with the cold, clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a terminal diagnosis. "Take your hands off my son this instant!" Barbara shrieked, her voice echoing violently off the sterile hospital walls. "You have absolutely no idea who you are dealing with. I am Barbara Sterling. I sit on the board of the Seattle Police Foundation. I fund political campaigns. I have dined with federal judges and the governor himself. I demand respect. I can make one single phone call right now and have your badge stripped from your chest before you even reach the local precinct. You will release him immediately." Special Agent Sterling did not even blink. His expression remained a mask of absolute freezing bureaucratic indifference. He stared down at Barbara, entirely unimpressed by her desperate, hysterical name-dropping. He had clearly spent his entire career dealing with arrogant white-collar criminals who believed their bank accounts placed them above the law. "Ma'am, interfering with an active federal arrest is a felony offense," Special Agent Sterling stated, his deep voice slicing right through her shrieks. "If you do not step aside immediately, you will be placed in restraints and transported alongside your son for obstruction of justice and assaulting a federal officer. Move away, now." The threat of actual physical consequences made Barbara flinch. For the first time in her pampered, insulated life, her elite status was completely irrelevant. She took a hesitant, staggering step backward, her hands dropping to her sides as the reality of federal authority finally penetrated her delusion. Agent Sterling bypassed her effortlessly, moving his imposing frame directly toward David. He gripped David by the bicep, hauling him forcefully to his feet. As he marched David forward, Sterling began to officially process the destruction of David's entire existence. "David Sterling, you are under arrest for international wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and grand larceny," Agent Sterling announced, his voice a relentless, rhythmic drumbeat. "You have the right to remain silent." Each word fell like a physical sledgehammer. David stumbled, his knees completely giving out, but the assisting officers held him upright, dragging his expensive leather loafers across the polished linoleum. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Sterling continued, his tone devoid of any human sympathy. He signaled to the officers. They forcefully spun David around, pressing him chest first against the cool concrete wall of the corridor. The cold, heavy, undeniable click of the steel handcuffs ratcheting tightly around David's wrists echoed sharply in the silent hallway. It was the absolute sound of finality. It was the sound of a billion-dollar facade snapping shut forever. "You have the right to an attorney," Sterling recited, locking the cuffs securely. "If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights as I have read them to you?" David pressed his tear-soaked face against the wall, sobbing openly, completely ignoring his right to silence. "I did not mean to," he choked out, his voice a pathetic, high-pitched whine. "Chloe made me do it. She froze my operating accounts. I had to secure the capital for my family. I had to protect my son." Hearing the word son, Barbara's delusional brain desperately latched onto her final, shattered lifeline. She spun around, her wild, frantic eyes locking onto Dr. Marcus. Marcus was standing calmly by the delivery suite doors, the manila folder holding Jessica's devastating genetic panel resting lightly in his hands. "Marcus," Barbara shrieked, sprinting back down the hall toward the chief of surgery. "You have to stop this immediately. This is your hospital. You have the ultimate authority here. You cannot let them drag him away like a common thug. David must see his child. He is the father. You must intervene so he can at least hold his newborn son before he goes to federal prison." Marcus looked at Barbara with an expression of such profound, icy pity that it was bordering on cruel. He did not move an inch toward the federal agents. He did not open the secure doors to the maternity ward. He simply lifted the manila folder, tapping the thick medical file with his index finger. Barbara, did you suffer a sudden catastrophic cognitive failure in the last 10 minutes? Marcus asked, his voice projecting clearly down the hall, ensuring David and the federal agents heard every single syllable. I just read you the raw biological data. The genetic markers are absolute. The blood types are entirely incompatible. David is O negative. Jessica is O negative. The infant currently breathing in that delivery room has an AB blood type. David is not the biological father of that child. You are lying! Barbara screamed, tears of pure, unadulterated denial streaming down her meticulously contoured face. She pounded her fists against the air, fighting against the impenetrable wall of science. Jessica is his wife. That is a sterling baby. That child is our legacy. You are fabricating medical records to hurt us. Your legacy is a spectacular, humiliating biological fraud, Barbara Marcus replied, his clinical detachment slicing through her hysteria like a surgical scalpel. Jessica has been engaging in a sustained long-term affair. My nursing staff overheard her frantic, desperate phone calls to the actual biological father when she went into premature labor this afternoon. She panicked. She knew the mandatory blood typing at birth would instantly expose her grift. There is no sterling heir. There is only a massive lie. David, still pinned against the wall by the FBI, let out an agonizing, animalistic wail. The sheer gravity of reality was finally penetrating his thick, arrogant skull. He had thrown away a brilliant, fiercely loyal wife. He had blindly signed away his entire corporate empire. He had committed a federal offense that would lock him in a cage for 2 decades. And he had sacrificed it all to finance a billion-dollar lifestyle for a manipulative, sociopathic grifter who was carrying another man's child. His entire life was a monument to his own spectacular stupidity. I slowly walked away from the elevator bank, the sharp click of my designer heels demanding attention as I moved directly into David's line of sight. He turned his head, his cheek pressed painfully against the wall, staring at me with hollow, dead eyes. You lost absolutely everything, David, I said, my voice perfectly calm, maintaining a freezing, lethal register. You wanted a shiny trophy wife to match your unearned, pathetic ego. You wanted to build a legacy on my money, my talent, and my hard work. Now look at yourself. You have no company, you have no money, you have no son. You have nothing but a pair of federal handcuffs and a long, miserable prison sentence. I turned to Barbara, who was now weeping hysterically on the floor outside the delivery room, her hands gripping the door handle, begging Marcus to let her inside, to see the baby that did not share a single drop of her precious blood. Enjoy the grand Sterling family legacy, Barbara. I offered, delivering my final parting gift. I hope it keeps you warm when you are liquidating your estate to pay for David's federal defense attorneys. I turned my back on the wreckage of their lives. I walked confidently back to the elevator, pressing the call button with steady, victorious fingers. I stepped inside the carriage, locked eyes with David one last time, and watched the heavy metal doors slide shut permanently, erasing David and Barbara Sterling from my reality. I jammed my thumb against the elevator door panel just as the metal carriage threatened to seal me away from the climax of the century. The heavy steel doors shuddered, reversing their track and sliding open with a soft mechanical hum. Erasing David and Barbara from my reality was the ultimate goal, but I was not about to deny myself the absolute pleasure of watching the final catastrophic detonation of their legacy. I stepped back out into the harsh fluorescent glare of the hallway. Special Agent Sterling maintained his iron grip on David's handcuffed arms, waiting patiently for the medical drama to conclude before hauling his prisoner to the federal transport vehicles downstairs. Barbara was practically hyperventilating, her hands clawing at her own throat as she stared at Dr. Marcus. She was desperately trying to process the O-negative blood type incompatibility, her elite country club brain violently rejecting the mathematical certainty of her daughter-in-law's infidelity. Marcus was not finished. He stepped purposefully forward, placing his body directly between the hysterical matriarch and the handcuffed fraudster. He raised the thick medical clipboard, his eyes cold and unyielding. I had already reviewed the digital copies of those exact lab reports earlier that morning. They were uploaded to the secure hospital server under the encrypted attachments. I knew exactly what kind of lethal ammunition Marcus was holding. "You think a simple blood type mismatch is the end of the story?" Barbara Marcus asked, his voice dripping with surgical precision. "I do not deal in implications, I deal in biological facts." When Jessica was admitted this afternoon, exhibiting signs of severe premature labor, we ran a comprehensive fetal DNA panel to screen for congenital anomalies. Because your son was listed as the primary emergency contact and the assumed father, our system automatically cross-referenced the fetal DNA markers with David's existing medical profile on file. Marcus explained, his words echoing off the polished linoleum. The O-negative blood type was merely the first red flag. The DNA sequencing is the absolute undeniable kill shot. Barbara shook her head frantically, her perfectly styled hair falling in ragged strands across her face. "Stop it!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the chief of surgery. "You are violating HIPAA. You are making this up to destroy my family. I will have your medical license revoked." "You do not have a family," Barbara Marcus shot back, his voice rising to completely overpower her hysteria. "You have a crime syndicate disguised as a country club membership, and you certainly do not have a biological grandson." Marcus turned his head, locking eyes with David, who was currently slumping against the grip of the federal agents. David looked like a hollowed-out shell, his face slick with panic sweat and fresh tears. "You pride yourself on your elite bloodline," Barbara Marcus stated, delivering the ultimate blow with zero hesitation. "You constantly brag about the sterling genetics. But the baby currently breathing inside that delivery room does not share a single strand of DNA with your son. We ran the markers through the state database to identify potential congenital risk factors. We found a perfect match." Marcus paused, letting the silence stretch out, twisting the knife deep into their shared delusion. "This baby belongs to Jessica's 22-year-old personal gym trainer," Marcus announced. The words hit the hallway like a physical shockwave. I leaned against the cool metal of the elevator frame, thoroughly enjoying the revelation. I had been tracking the corporate credit card David so foolishly issued to Jessica 6 months ago. The billing statements had read like a tragic comedy. 3 weekly charges for private in-home training sessions at $200 a pop, always billed during the exact hours David was stuck in board meetings, trying to untangle the financial mess he had created. Jessica was literally using my company's money to finance her infidelity, while David paraded her around as his ultimate prize. David let out a ragged, suffocating gasp, his knees buckled entirely, his full body weight suddenly suspended by the 2 FBI agents holding his arms. "A gym trainer," Barbara whispered, her voice completely devoid of air. The haughty, arrogant billionaire matriarch looked like she had just been struck by lightning. Her face turned a sickly shade of ash white. "Yes, Barbara, a gym trainer," Marcus confirmed, his tone relentless. "A kid fresh out of college who charges $60 an hour to spot squats at the luxury fitness club down the street. Jessica has been sleeping with him since before she even forced David to sign those expedited divorce papers. She needed a wealthy host to finance her lifestyle, and your son was desperate enough and foolish enough to play the part perfectly." The illusion of the perfect superior Sterling family shattered, instantly raining down around them in jagged, invisible shards. The realization of his total catastrophic failure finally crashed into David's brain with the force of an exploding sun. He had thrown away a fiercely loyal wife. He had blindly signed away his billion-dollar corporate empire. He had eagerly committed a federal wire fraud offense that was going to lock him in a maximum security prison for the next 20 years. And he had sacrificed absolutely all of it for a manipulative grifter who was carrying the child of a 22-year-old fitness instructor. "David is not a father," Marcus concluded, his voice echoing with brutal finality. "He is just a mark." David screamed. It was not a word. It was a guttural, animalistic howl of pure, unadulterated agony that tore violently from his throat. He thrashed against the federal agents, his expensive suit tearing at the seams as he fought blindly against the steel handcuffs cutting into his wrists. He screamed Jessica's name, cursing her, crying out in a display of pathetic, miserable despair. Special Agent Sterling did not flinch. He simply tightened his grip, hauling David upward with practiced authoritative force. "We are done here," Sterling stated coldly. "Move him to the transport vehicle." The agents dragged David away. He kicked and thrashed his loafers, sliding uselessly across the linoleum, his screams echoing down the long, sterile corridor until the heavy doors of the freight elevator swallowed him whole. Barbara remained completely frozen in the center of the hallway. Her designer bag slipped from her shoulder, hitting the floor with a dull, heavy thud. The impenetrable fortress of her inherited privilege, her elite social standing, and her precious bloodline had been completely vaporized in less than 10 minutes. She was standing in the ruins of her own arrogance. I watched her tremble, utterly broken and alone. I did not say another word to her. She was no longer worth the oxygen required to speak. I simply turned my back, stepped fully into my elevator, and let the doors close, leaving the Sterling legacy exactly where it belonged. In the trash. In the trash. But before the heavy brass doors could completely seal shut, a violent, piercing shriek ripped through the corridor. The sound was so entirely unhinged, it triggered the elevator's acoustic safety sensors, causing the doors to shudder, halt, and slide back open. Barbara had completely snapped. The polished high society matriarch evaporated, replaced instantly by a feral, cornered predator. She hurled her entire body at the heavy wooden double doors of the delivery suite. Her fists pounded against the reinforced glass with manic, destructive force, her diamond rings scratching the pane. "You filthy little parasite!" Barbara screamed, her vocal cords tearing with the sheer volume of her rage. She kicked the door, her expensive heels leaving black scuff marks on the pristine white paint. "You stole my son. You ruined our bloodline. You are nothing but a cheap, manipulative street rat. You lied to us." Hospital security, previously hanging back at Dr. Marcus's silent command, finally surged forward. Two burly guards grabbed Barbara by the arms, dragging her forcefully away from the maternity ward. She thrashed wildly, spitting curses, her Chanel jacket tearing at the shoulder seam as she fought them with the crazed strength of a woman who had just watched her entire universe burn to ash. Seeing his mother physically restrained and the federal agents stepping forward to drag him toward the freight elevator, David's remaining grip on reality shattered. Pure, suffocating panic took over. He twisted his body, throwing his shoulder against one of the FBI agents and lunging directly toward my open elevator. He hit the floor hard, his knees slamming into the metal track of the elevator carriage. The federal agents were instantly on top of him, grabbing him by the back of his jacket, but David ignored them. He craned his neck upward, his tear-soaked, swollen face, looking up at me from the floor. The heavy steel handcuffs dug into his wrists as he desperately tried to reach out to me. "Chloe, please." David begged, his voice cracking into a pathetic, breathless sob. "Please do not leave me here. You cannot let them take me away." I looked down at him, my expression entirely unreadable. The man kneeling before me was entirely unrecognizable. The arrogant, dismissive CEO who had constantly belittled my ambition and mocked my success was gone. In his place was a sniveling, desperate coward facing the absolute destruction of his life. "You are a billionaire, Chloe." David pleaded, his chest heaving as the FBI agents gripped his shoulders, preparing to haul him backward. "You have the capital. You can post my bail. You can hire the best defense attorneys in the country. We were married for 7 years. We built a life together. You know I am a good man deep down. I just made a terrible mistake. I will sign anything you want. I will give you whatever you ask for. Please, Chloe. I am begging you. Save me." I stared at him, letting the absolute silence stretch between us. I wanted him to feel the immense, crushing weight of his own pathetic audacity. He was actually kneeling in a hospital corridor, wearing federal handcuffs, begging the ex-wife he had financially and emotionally abused to use her hard-earned wealth to rescue him from the consequences of embezzling funds to impress his cheating mistress. The sheer concentrated narcissism was almost breathtaking. David, I said, my voice dropping to a low, freezing whisper that cut through the noise of Barbara's distant struggling. You did not make a mistake. You made a series of calculated, deliberate choices. You chose to betray our marriage. You chose to steal from my company. You chose to funnel millions of dollars through fraudulent offshore accounts to buy a mansion for a woman who was actively sleeping with a gym trainer. I took a slow, deliberate step forward. The heels of my shoes clicked sharply against the metal floor of the elevator. You wanted a woman who would look good on your arm and never question your authority. I continued, my gaze locking onto his terrified eyes. You wanted someone who would blindly worship the sterling name. Well, you got exactly what you paid for. You bought an illusion and you financed it with a federal felony. The federal agents pulled David backward. He scrambled on his knees, his expensive loafers scraping against the floor, crying out my name in a final desperate plea for salvation. I lifted my chin, my eyes shifting from the broken man on the floor to his mother. Barbara was still fighting against the security guards, panting heavily, her face stained with running mascara and tears. She locked eyes with me, her expression a turbulent mix of boiling hatred and absolute horrifying defeat. I held her gaze perfectly. I let her see the absolute, undisputed victory radiating from my posture. You were right, Barbara, I stated, projecting my voice clearly down the corridor so every single word landed with maximum impact. Leaving me was the best decision David ever made, because it made me a millionaire and it made him a federal inmate. Barbara's mouth fell open in a silent, horrified scream. She had no rebuttal, she had no defense. The words hit her like a physical blow, permanently etching the reality of their destruction into her brain. I stepped back into the center of the elevator carriage. I pressed the lobby button. Take him away, Agent Sterling, I commanded smoothly, never breaking eye contact with David. The FBI agents hauled David to his feet. He hung limp in their grasp, a totally defeated shell of a man, his sobs echoing pitifully against the walls. The elevator doors finally began to slide shut, the heavy brass panels slowly eclipsing the chaotic, ruined hallway. My last glimpse of the Sterling family was David being marched toward the freight elevator in steel cuffs, while Barbara slumped against the security guards, completely broken and stripped of every ounce of her stolen dignity. The doors closed with a solid, satisfying metallic clank. The descent was smooth and quiet. I checked my reflection in the polished brass panels, smoothing a single stray lock of hair back into place. My posture was flawless. My mind was completely clear. When the elevator reached the ground floor, the doors opened to the bustling, brightly lit hospital lobby. I stepped out, breathing in the crisp, cool air of absolute freedom. The heavy, suffocating weight of the Sterling family was permanently lifted from my shoulders. I pulled my phone from my designer bag, firing off a quick message to my chief operating officer. I confirmed my attendance at the 9 o'clock board meeting tomorrow morning. I had a massive, thriving empire to run, and the future had never looked brighter. 6 months passed with the brutal, unstoppable efficiency of a guillotine. The dust from the Sterling family implosion finally settled, leaving behind a landscape completely barren of their former arrogance. The justice system, usually slow and grinding, moved with terrifying speed when presented with the absolute mountain of forensic evidence I had meticulously gathered. I received a sterile automated email notification last Tuesday, confirming David's permanent transfer to a medium-security federal correctional institution. The judge showed zero leniency during his highly publicized sentencing hearing. International wire fraud combined with corporate embezzlement and violating federal banking statutes earned him a mandatory 5-year sentence with absolutely no possibility of early parole. The man who once threw a violent tantrum because his personal tailor used the wrong thread count on his imported Italian suits was now wearing standard-issue khaki canvas. He had lost his private jets, his corner office, and his grand illusion of supremacy. I received notice that he had desperately requested I be put on his approved visitor list. I blocked the prison facility's phone number without a second thought. Let him rot in the bed he made. David's physical incarceration was deeply satisfying. But it was nothing compared to the absolute suffocating social execution Barbara endured. Federal prosecutors did not just freeze David's operating accounts. They traced the fraudulent offshore wire transfers directly to the generational family trust Barbara relied upon to maintain her aristocratic, untouchable facade. The government seized the entire trust to pay for David's court-ordered corporate restitution. Barbara lost the sprawling multi-million-dollar family estate in less than 60 days. She was unceremoniously evicted from the premises by federal marshals, forced to stand on the curb and watch as movers boxed up her precious legacy. Today, the former queen of the Seattle elite lives in a damp 400-square-foot garden-level apartment situated directly next to a noisy highway overpass. Her lifetime membership to the exclusive country club was publicly and permanently revoked. When she attempted to attend a charity luncheon last month, security turned her away at the door while her former socialite friends watched through the glass. They treat her like a walking contagion. She has absolutely nothing left but a cramped closet full of fading Chanel suits and the crushing, inescapable reality of her biological obsolescence. As for Jessica, the grand prize winner of David's spectacular self-destruction, her downfall was equally poetic. The 22-year-old personal trainer bolted the absolute second the corporate credit cards started declining. He had zero interest in changing diapers, pushing a stroller, or financing a disgraced social climber who no longer had access to a billionaire's bank account. Jessica now lives in a rusted single-wide trailer on the bleak outskirts of the city. She is raising another man's child entirely alone, surviving on government assistance, permanently exiled from the lavish lifestyle she blew up 2 lives to steal. She gambled a corporate empire for a shiny new toy and walked away with absolute poverty. I stood perfectly still, letting the warmth of the morning sun wash over my face. My new corporate headquarters occupied the entire top floor of the newest glass high-rise in downtown Seattle. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered an unobstructed, commanding view of the city skyline, the harbor, and the endless horizon beyond. The space was sleek, modern, and entirely mine. There were no ghosts of David's incompetence lingering in the hallways. There were no echoes of Barbara's shrill demands. There was only the quiet, humming machinery of absolute success. The heavy glass door to my executive suite opened. Maya walked in holding a sleek silver tablet, her face glowing with intense professional pride. Dr. Marcus followed closely behind her, looking immaculate in a tailored charcoal suit, having taken a brief leave from the hospital to witness the launch. They stood beside me at the massive mahogany conference table, the 2 people who had maintained absolute loyalty when the rest of my world was burning. "We are officially live, Chloe," Maya announced, tapping the screen of her tablet with a bright, victorious smile. "The initial endowment has cleared the primary accounts. The press release is currently dominating the morning financial wire. The phones are already ringing. We were not just celebrating the massive expansion of my tech firm. We were launching the Phoenix Initiative, a multi-million-dollar legal aid foundation, fully funded by the recovered assets I seized from David's fraudulent accounts. The foundation was designed with one specific, ruthless purpose. We provided elite shark-tier forensic accountants and top-tier divorce attorneys to women who were being financially abused, hidden from, or defrauded by their wealthy husbands. We were leveling the playing field for women who were standing exactly where I stood a year ago, ensuring no one would ever be crushed by a man like David again. "It is a brilliant structure," Marcus noted, looking over the digital charter displayed on the conference room monitor. "You are taking the exact mechanism David used to try and destroy you and weaponizing it to dismantle men exactly like him. It is surgical. It is poetic justice." I turned away from the window, looking at my brilliant chief operating officer and the surgeon who had delivered the ultimate biological kill shot to the sterling legacy. I felt a profound, untouchable calm radiating through my entire body. I poured 3 glasses of sparkling water, handing them across the polished table. We raised our glasses in the quiet sunlight of my massive new empire. I looked out over the sprawling city, reflecting on the bitter tears, the stolen funds, the gaslighting, and the sheer audacity of the people who thought they could break me. "They tried to bury me, not knowing I was a seed," I said, my voice ringing with absolute unshakable power. Revenge isn't about destroying their lives. It's about building an empire on the ashes of their lies. The ultimate lesson from Chloe's journey is that true lasting vindication comes entirely from quietly building an unshakable foundation of self-reliance. When toxic people deliberately attempt to dismantle your self-worth, the absolute most devastating weapon you can wield is your own independent success. Chloe proved you shouldn't ever waste precious energy screaming at closed doors. Instead, you must invest that energy into constructing your own beautiful empire. We must learn to transform our deepest betrayals into the fuel for our greatest triumphs. Have you ever turned a painful betrayal into a personal victory? Share your story in the comments below.